Step aboard the luxurious blue train where a cursed ruby, the heart of fire, sparks a deadly game of greed and betrayal. When Ruth Kettering is found murdered, her priceless jewels stolen, Hercule Poirot must unravel a web of lies among glamorous. Suspects her estranged husband, a cunning dancer, and a shadowy thief known as the Marquis. In just 14 chapters, secrets unravel, alliances shift, and Poirot's brilliance exposes a chilling conspiracy. Will the ruby's curse claim more lives, or will justice prevail? Dive into this thrilling mystery now. Chapter 1. The heart of Freth late winter sun cast a golden glow over Paris, its light filtering through the tall windows of the exclusive jeweller's shop on the Rue de l'Opakes. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of polished wood and the faint tang of metal, as if the very walls exhaled wealth. Hercule Poirot, his small, precise frame wrapped in a perfectly tailored overcoat, stood near the entrance, his sharp green eyes scanning the room. He had not come to purchase anything on. That was not his purpose today, but to absorb the scene unfolding before him. His mustache, waxed to perfection, twitched slightly as he noted the tension in the air. A tension that seemed to hum like a plucked string dot. At the center of the shop stood Rufus Van Aldine, a man whose presence commanded attention as surely as his millions commanded markets. The American millionaire, broad-shouldered and silver-haired, leaned over a velvet-lined case, his thick fingers hovering above a gem that seemed to pulse with an inner fire. The heart of fire ruby, a stone of almost mythical repute, lay nestled in its display, its deep crimson facets catching the light and throwing it back in a blaze of scarlet. It was said to have adorned the crowns of forgotten emperors, to have been stolen from a mule treasury, and to carry a curse that brought ruin to those who possessed it. Van Aldine, however, was not a man to be swayed by superstition. His eyes gleamed with a different kind of fire, determination, perhaps, or the thrill of acquisition. "Magnificent, isn't it?" said Monsieur Duval, the jeweller, his voice smooth as silk. He was a weary man with a thin mustache, his hands clasped behind his back as if to restrain his own excitement. "The heart of fire is unparalleled, Monsieur Van Aldine. A stone of such size, such clarity, there is none other like it in the world." Van Aldine grunted, his gaze fixed on the ruby. "I'm not here for fairy tales, Duval. I want it for my daughter. Name your price." Duval's smile tightened, but he named a figure that made the assistant at the counter gasp audibly before catching herself. Poirot, standing near a display of emerald brooches, raised an eyebrow. The sum was astronomical, enough to buy a small chateau, but Van Aldine did not flinch. He reached into his coat, produced a checkbook, and began writing with the calm deliberation of a man signing a contract for a new factory. "It's for Ruth," Van Aldine said, almost to himself as he tore out the check. "She's been through. Enough. This'll cheer her up." Poirot's ears pricked at the name. Ruth Kettering, Van Aldine's only child, was a figure of some notoriety. Her name whispered in the society pages of London and New York. Her marriage to Derek Kettering, a charming but feckless English aristocrat, was said to be crumbling, and rumors of her dalliances with a certain Comte de la Roche had reached even Poirot's ears. The ruby, he mused, was not just a gift, but a statement, a father's attempt to anchor his daughter in a world of shifting loyalties. As Van Aldine completed the transaction, Poirot stepped closer, his polished shoes silent on the thick carpet. "Pardon, Monsieur Van Aldine," he said, his voice soft but carrying an unmistakable authority. "It is a remarkable stone, this heart of fire. But if I may be so bold, are you not concerned by its reputation?" Van Aldine turned, his broad face creasing into a frown. He recognized Poirot at once, Hercule Poirot, the diminutive Belgian detective whose reputation for solving the unsolvable had made him a legend. "Poirot," he said, his tone gruff but not unkind, "didn't expect to see you here. You believe in curses?" Poirot's mustache twitched again, a faint smile playing beneath it. "I believe, monsieur, in the human heart. It is capable of far greater mischief than any curse. A stone such as this, it attracts envy, greed, perhaps even violence. Van Aldine snorted. Let him try. Ruth's taking the blue train to Nice tomorrow. She'll wear it, show it off. Nobody's fool enough to tangle with my security. Poirot inclined his head, his expression unreadable. Of course, monsieur. I wish Mademoiselle Ruth a safe journey. As Van Aldine departed, the ruby secured in a velvet-lined box, Poirot lingered, his gaze drifting to the empty case where the heart of fire had rested. He had no case to investigate, no reason to suspect foul play yet, but his instincts, those finely tuned instruments of deduction, whispered that this ruby would not pass quietly through the world. The next morning, the Gare de Lyon buzzed with the controlled chaos of a grand departure, the blue train, its sleek blue carriages gleaming under the station's iron and glass canopy, stood ready to whisk its passengers to the sun-drenched Riviera. Porters darted about, their caps askew, hauling trunks and hat boxes. The air was alive with the chatter of travellers' aristocrats, heiresses, and the newly rich, all drawn to the train's promise of luxury and escape. Ruth Kettering stood on the platform, her fur-trimmed coat a stark contrast to the pale February sky. She was a striking woman, tall and elegant, with dark hair swept beneath a cloaky hat and eyes that held a quiet defiance. The ruby, now set in a delicate gold necklace, rested at her throat, its fire muted but unmistakable. She adjusted her gloves, her movements precise, as if to steady herself against the weight of her own thoughts. Beside her stood Ada Mason, her maid, a mousy woman with a pinched face and nervous hands. "Everything's in order, ma'am," Ada said, her voice barely audible over the station's din. "Your compartment is ready, and I've seen to the luggage." Ruth nodded absently, her gaze fixed on the train. "Good. I want no fuss, Ada. Just a quiet trip." "Of course, ma'am," Ada replied, but her eyes flickered toward the ruby, a quick, almost involuntary glance. Poirot, standing a discreet distance away, observed the exchange. He had decided, on a whim or so he told himself, to take the blue train himself. Retirement, he found, did not suit him. The promise of a case, however faint, was enough to draw him south. He adjusted his hat, a sleek fedora, and boarded the train, his small suitcase carried by a porter who seemed bemused by its lightness. The first-class carriage was a marvel of Art Deco elegance, its polished wood panels and plush velvet seats exuding wealth. Poirot settled into his compartment, his eyes scanning the passengers as they boarded. There was Catherine Grey, a quiet Englishwoman in her 30s, her plain but pleasant face brightened by an unexpected inheritance that had freed her from a life of service. She carried herself with a newfound confidence, her eyes sharp and observant. Poirot noted her at once. She had the air of someone who saw more than she said. Then there was Derek Kettering, Ruth's husband, his handsome face marred by a petulant scowl. He strode through the carriage, his tailored suit slightly rumpled, as if he had dressed in haste. Poirot's eyebrows rose. Derek was not supposed to be on this train. His presence suggested either reconciliation or trouble. Given the rumors, Poirot suspected the latter. The train's whistle pierced the air, and with a gentle lurch, the blue train began its journey. Poirot leaned back in his seat, his fingers steepled, his mind already weaving a tapestry of possibilities. The ruby, the strained marriage, the whispered curse. There was a pattern here, waiting to be uncovered. As the train crossed the French countryside, the passengers settled into their routines. In the dining car, crystal glasses clinked and waiters moved with balletic precision, serving champagne and caviar. Ruth Kettering sat alone at a table, the ruby catching the light with every movement. She seemed oblivious to the stares it attracted, her thoughts elsewhere. Catherine Grey, seated nearby, sipped her tea and watched the other passengers. She had no particular reason to be curious, yet she found herself drawn to the drama unfolding around her. Ruth's solitude, Derek's agitation, the nervous glances of Ada Mason, all were pieces of a puzzle she could not yet name. Poirot, dining at a corner table, observed Catherine's quiet scrutiny. "Mademoiselle," he said, approaching her table with a courteous bow, "you have the eye of an observer. Tell me, what do you see in this carriage?" Catherine blushed, surprised by the attention, I'm not sure I see anything special. Monsieur Poirot, just people. Some seem troubled. Troubled, oui, Poirot said, his eyes twinkling. And trouble, mademoiselle, is often the prelude to a mystery. Permit me to join you? Catherine nodded and Poirot sat, his small frame somehow commanding the space. This train, he said, is a microcosm of the world. Wealth, ambition, love, betrayal, all are here, compressed into these carriages, and at the centre, a ruby that burns like a beacon. Catherine glanced at Ruth. That necklace, it's beautiful, but it makes me uneasy. There's something about it. Poirot nodded. You have the instinct, mademoiselle. The heart of fire is not just a jewel. It is a catalyst. It draws out what lies hidden in the hearts of those who desire it. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Morel, a dancer whose flamboyant beauty turned heads as she swept into the dining car. Her dress, a daring shade of emerald, clung to her curves, and her laughter was as bright as the chandeliers. She paused at Ruth's table, her smile sharp. "What a lovely bauble, Mrs. Kettering," she said, her voice dripping with honeyed malice. "It must feel so heavy to wear." Ruth's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing, her fingers brushing the ruby as if to protect it. Morel moved on, joining Derek at another table, her laughter ringing out again. Poirot watched the exchange, his mind cataloguing every gesture, every word. That night, as the train hurtled through the darkness, the atmosphere grew heavier. In her compartment, Ruth Kettering sat before a small mirror, brushing her hair with mechanical precision. The ruby lay on the table beside her, its glow muted in the dim light. She had locked the door, but the sense of unease lingered, as if the curse whispered from the shadows. Ada Mason knocked softly. "Ma'am, shall I take the necklace to the safe?" Ruth hesitated, then shook her head. "No, Ada, I'll keep it with me tonight." Ada's face betrayed a flicker of something fear, perhaps, or something deeper. "As you wish, Mum," she said. Retreating Dot in his own compartment, Poirot sat with a notebook, jotting down observations. The train's rhythm was soothing, but his mind was alert. He had seen the glances, the tensions, the unspoken rivalries. The heart of fire was more than a jewel, it was a magnet for trouble. Outside, the French countryside blurred past, a tapestry of fields and villages under a starless sky. The train's whistle sounded, a lonely cry in the night. Poirot closed his notebook, his thoughts turning to the ruby and the woman who wore it. He had no evidence, no crime to investigate yet, but his little grey cells, those tireless instruments of deduction, were already at work. The hours passed and the train's passengers slept, or tried to, in the corridor. A figure moved silently, pausing outside Ruth's compartment. The doors. Lock was sturdy, but locks, as Poirot knew, were no match for determination. A faint click echoed in the stillness, unnoticed by the sleeping passengers. By morning, the blue train would reach Nice and the world would change for those aboard. The heart of fire, with its promise of beauty and danger, would cast its shadow over them all, and Hercule Poirot, with his unerring instinct for truth, would be ready to step into the light. Chapter 2. The blue train departs. Platform at Victoria Station was a symphony of clatter and clamour, a grand stage where the opulent blue train awaited its passengers. The air was thick with the scent of coal smoke and anticipation, the great iron beast hissing softly as porters bustled about, hoisting leather trunks and polished suitcases into the luggage car. It was a crisp February morning in 1928, and the train, bound for Nice, gleamed under the weak London sun, its cobalt blue carriages a striking contrast to the grey stone of the station. The blue train, officially Le Train Bleu, was no mere mode of transport. It was a rolling palace, a marvel of luxury that promised its passengers a journey as grand as their destinations on the French Riviera. Ruth Kettering stood near the platform's edge, her gloved hands clasped tightly around the handle of a small valise. Her fur-lined coat, a rich emerald green, did little to warm the chill that clung to her heart, the heart of fire ruby. A gift from her father, Rufus van Aldine, hung heavily around her neck, concealed beneath a silk scarf. Its weight was both literal and metaphorical. a reminder of the curse whispered about in Paris salons, and the strained ties of her marriage to Derek Kettering. She glanced at the crowd, her dark eyes searching for a familiar face, though she wasn't entirely sure whose. The Comte de la Roche, perhaps? The thought sent a flicker of warmth through her, quickly doused by the memory of her father's disapproval. "Madam, your compartment is ready," said a porter, his voice deferential, as he gestured toward the first-class carriage. Ruth nodded, her expression composed but distant, and followed him, her heels clicking sharply against the platform. She was a woman accustomed to attention, her beauty striking yet tempered by a quiet unease that seemed to shadow her every step. Inside the carriage, the world transformed into one of polished wood, plush velvet, and gleaming brass. The corridor was narrow but elegant, with frosted glass panels etched with delicate patterns. Ruth's compartment was a marvel of compact luxury. A cushioned bench that would convert into a bed, a small fold-down table, and a window offering glimpses of the platform's chaos. Her maid, Ada Mason, was already there, arranging Ruth's belongings with the precision of a soldier. Ada was a plain woman, her mousy brown hair pulled tightly back, her movements efficient but unremarkable. "Everything's in order, Mum," she said, her voice low and respectful. Ruth barely acknowledged her, her gaze fixed on the window, where the crowd swirled like a restless sea. Among the crowd was Catherine Grey, a woman whose recent inheritance had thrust her into a world she scarcely understood. At 33, Catherine was neither young nor old, neither plain nor beautiful, but there was a quiet intelligence in her grey eyes that drew attention. Her modest navy coat and sensible had marked her as someone unaccustomed to extravagance, yet she carried herself with a dignity that suggested she was learning quickly. She had boarded the blue train on a whim, her newfound wealth allowing her to escape the confines of St. Mary Mead and seek adventure on the Riviera. As she stepped into the carriage, her eyes took in the opulence with a mixture of awe and amusement. "It's like stepping into a novel," she murmured to herself. Settling into her compartment across from Ruth's, the train's whistle sounded, a sharp, imperious note that signaled departure. The platform began to clear as passengers found their places, and the great engine roared to life, pulling the train smoothly out of Victoria Station. The city's grey sprawl gave way to the open countryside, the fields dusted with frost, the sky a pale wash of blue. Inside, the passengers settled into their roles, some reading, others chatting, and a few, like Hercule Poirot, observing. Poirot, semi-retired but never truly at rest, sat in his own compartment, a small leather notebook open on the table before him. His moustache was immaculate, his patent leather shoes gleaming, and his green eyes missed nothing. He had chosen the blue train for a quiet journey to Nice, intending to enjoy the Riviera's sun and perhaps a few good meals, but already his mind was alert, sensing the undercurrents of tension among his fellow travelers. He had noticed Ruth, Kettering at once, her beauty marred by a certain fragility, and he had seen the way her husband, Derek, lingered on the platform, his handsome face clouded with something darker than mere discontent. Derek Kettering was a man who wore his charm, like a well-tailored suit, but it was fraying at the edges. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, his eyes shadowed from a night of too much wine and too little sleep. He had boarded the train at the last moment, his ticket purchased in a fit of defiance after a heated argument with Ruth's father. Rufus van Aldine had made it clear that Derek was no longer welcome in their family, and the Rubio, that cursed ruby, was a symbol of everything Derek could never provide. He slumped into his seat in the dining car, ordering a whiskey despite the early hour, and ignored the curious glances of the other passengers. Among those passengers was Morel, the flamboyant dancer whose presence was impossible to ignore. Her scarlet dress clung to her curves, and her laughter was as bold as the perfume that trailed in her wake. She was Derek's mistress, a fact she made no effort to conceal, and her eyes sparkled with a mix of mischief and malice as she surveyed the dining car. She had joined the blue train on a whim, hoping to provoke Derek into some grand gesture. But now she found herself intrigued by the other passengers, particularly the quiet Catherine Grey. Who seemed so out of place among the glittering elite? The dining car was a study in contrasts, its long table set with crisp white linens and silver cutlery, the windows framing the rolling countryside. Passengers drifted in and out, some lingering over coffee, others exchanging polite small talk. Poirot, seated near the window, sipped his tisane and watched. He noted the way Ruth avoided Derrick's gaze, the way Morell's laughter grew sharper when Derrick entered, and the way Catherine Grey seemed to observe it all with a quiet intensity. There was something about Catherine that intrigued him, a clarity of thought, perhaps, or a refusal to be dazzled by the train's glamour. As the afternoon wore on, the train crossed the channel, the ferry's gentle sway giving way to the steady rhythm of the French rails. The landscape changed, the fields giving way to vineyards and stone villages, the air growing warmer as they moved south. In her compartment, Ruth sat alone, her fingers tracing the outline of the ruby beneath her scarf. She had not wanted to wear it, but her father had insisted, claiming it was a symbol of her strength. "You're a Van Aldine," he had said, his voice gruff with pride. "You wear it, and you show the world who you are." But Ruth felt no strength, only a growing sense of dread, the ruby's history tales of theft, betrayal, and death pressed against her like a physical weight. Ada Mason knocked softly. Before entering, her face pale. "Is there anything you need, ma'am?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ruth shook her head, dismissing her with a wave. Ada hesitated, then stepped back into the corridor, her eyes darting nervously toward the other compartments. She had seen something or someone on the platform, a fleeting glimpse that had unsettled her, but she could not bring herself to speak of it. Not yet. In the dining car, Derrick was joined by Major Richard Knighton, Rufus Van Alden's secretary, who had boarded the train in Calais. Knighton was a tall, fair-haired man with a military bearing and a quiet manner that belied his sharp mind. He had been sent by Van Aldine to keep an eye on Ruth, though he was careful not to say so. "Fine journey, isn't it?" Knighton said, settling across from Derrick. Derrick grunted, his fingers tightening around his glass. "If you say so," he muttered, his tone laced with bitterness. Knighton raised an eyebrow but said nothing, his gaze drifting to the window. Poirot, ever watchful, noted the exchange. He had met Knighton briefly in London, a man of impeccable manners and vague loyalties. There was something about him, perhaps, the way his eyes lingered on Ruth's compartment door, that suggested he was more than a mere secretary. Poirot made a mental note, his fingers tapping lightly on his notebook. As evening fell, the train's lights cast a warm glow over the carriages, and the passengers gathered for dinner. The dining car was a spectacle, the crystal chandeliers sparkling, the waiters moving with practiced grace. Ruth sat alone, her plate barely touched, her eyes fixed on the ruby now visible at her throat. Its deep red glow seemed to pulse in the candlelight, drawing glances from every corner of the room. Morell, seated nearby, leaned toward her companion, a wealthy industrialist, and whispered something that made him laugh. Catherine Grey, dining with an elderly couple from Sussex, watched the scene with quiet curiosity, her mind cataloguing every detail. Poirot, seated at a small table, savoured his cocoa vin while his eyes roamed the room. He noted the way Derrick's hand trembled slightly as he lifted his glass, the way Morell's smile faltered when she caught Ruth's sigh, and the way Knighton seemed to watch them all without ever seeming to. There was a pattern here, Poirot thought, a web of connections that had yet to reveal itself. He was not yet investigating a crime, but his instincts told him that the blue train was carrying more than passengers. It was carrying secrets. The night deepened, and the train hurtled through the French countryside, its rhythm a soothing counterpoint to the tensions within. Ruth retired to her compartment, locking the door behind her. Ada Mason, stationed in the corridor, kept watch, her face pale and drawn. Catherine Grey, unable to sleep, sat by her window, watching the stars flicker above the dark fields. Derrick, in his own compartment, stared at the ceiling, his thoughts a tangle of anger and regret. And Poirot, ever vigilant, made his way to the observation car where he stood alone, the cool night air brushing against his face. The blue train was a world unto itself, a microcosm of wealth, ambition, and hidden desires. As it sped toward Nice, its passengers were unaware of the storm gathering around them, a storm that would soon break with devastating force, for now they slept, or tried to, their dreams colored by the ruby's glow and the train's relentless motion. But Hercule Poirot did not sleep. His mind was at work, piecing together the fragments of a puzzle that had not yet fully formed. The hours passed, the train's whistle echoing through the night, a herald of the mysteries to come. The blue train was more than a journey, it was a stage, and its players were poised for a drama that would test the limits of Poirot's genius. The ruby, the curse, the secrets all were threads in a tapestry that would soon unravel, revealing a truth as dazzling and dangerous as the heart of fire itself. Chapter 3. Shadows on the rails. The blue train hurtled through the French countryside, its wheels singing a rhythmic song against the steel tracks, a melody that seemed to underscore the growing unease among its passengers. The opulent interiors, with their polished wood paneling, plush velvet seats and gleaming brass fittings, contrasted sharply with the undercurrent of tension that had begun to weave itself through the compartments. The night was dark, the sky a velvet curtain studded with stars, but inside the train, shadows seemed to move with a life of their own, as if the very air was charged with secrets waiting to spill. Ruth Kettering sat alone in her private compartment, her fingers tracing the edges of the velvet case that held the heart of fire ruby. The gem, a deep, pulsating red, seemed to glow faintly in the dim light of the carriage, its facets catching the flicker of the overhead lamp. She had dismissed her maid Ada Mason for the night, craving solitude to wrestle with her thoughts. Her marriage to Derek was a shattered thing, held together only by the brittle threads of social expectation, and her father's disapproval of divorce. The ruby, a gift from Rufus van Aldine, was meant to be a symbol of love, but to Ruth it felt like a weight, a reminder of her father's expectations and the curse whispered about in Parisian salons. She snapped the case shut and tucked it into her traveling bag, her eyes drifting to the window where the darkness outside mirrored her mood. In the dining car, the atmosphere was a curious blend of forced gaiety and subtle suspicion. The passengers, a cosmopolitan mix of wealth and ambition, mingled over crystal glasses of champagne and plates of delicately prepared pheasant. Catherine Gray, seated at a small table near the window, observed the scene with quiet curiosity. Her recent inheritance had thrust her into a world of luxury she was unaccustomed to, and she found herself both fascinated and detached from the glittering crowd. Her grey eyes, sharp and perceptive, took in every detail. The way Morel, the flamboyant dancer, tossed her head back in laughter, her eyes darting toward Derek Kettering, the Comte de la Roche's polished charm as he leaned toward a dowager dripping in diamonds, and the unobtrusive figure of Hercule Poirot, his small, precise movements belying the intensity of his observation. Poirot, semi-retired but ever alert, sipped his tisane, his mustache twitching slightly as he surveyed the room. The blue train was a microcosm of human nature, he thought, a stage where greed, love, and betrayal played out their timeless drama. He had boarded the train on a whim, seeking a quiet journey to the Riviera, but already his instincts were stirring. Something was amiss, though he could not yet pinpoint what. His gaze lingered on Derek Kettering, who stood at the bar, his handsome face set in a scowl as he downed a whiskey. Derek's presence on the train, so soon after Ruth's decision to travel alone, was no coincidence. Poirot was certain. As the evening wore on, the dining car began to empty, passengers retiring to their compartments or lingering in the smoking lounge. Catherine, feeling the weight of the day, decided to take a stroll through the train before retiring. The corridors were narrow, the soft carpet muffling her steps. As she passed the closed doors of the sleeping cars, she paused near Ruth's compartment, her attention caught by a faint sound, a rustle, perhaps, or the creak of a door. The train swayed gently, and she steadied herself against the wall, her eyes scanning the dim corridor. For a moment, she thought she saw a shadow move, a fleeting silhouette that vanished as quickly as it appeared. Shaking her head, she dismissed it as a trick of the light, but the unease lingered in her own compartment. Ada Mason was preparing for bed, her movements brisk and efficient. The maid was a pale, mousy woman, her face unremarkable save for the sharp intelligence in her eyes. She had served Ruth for nearly a year, her loyalty unquestioned. But tonight her hands trembled slightly as she folded her mistress's shawl. She had seen something or someone near Ruth's compartment earlier, a figure that had slipped away before she could be certain. Ada hesitated, wondering if she should report it to Ruth, but decided against it. Her mistress was already on edge, and Ada had no desire to add to her distress. Instead, she made a mental note to keep a closer eye on the corridor. Poirot, meanwhile, had retired to his own compartment but found sleep elusive. He sat at the small writing desk, his notebook open before him, though he had yet to write a single word. His mind was busy piecing together the fragments of what he had observed. Derek Kettering's agitation, Ruth's preoccupation. The Comte's two smooth charm each was a thread in a tapestry that was still taking shape. He rose and stepped into the corridor, his small frame moving with surprising agility. The train was quiet now, save for the hum of the engines and the occasional clink of glass from the dining car. As he passed Ruth's compartment, he paused, his sharp ears catching the faintest sound, a muffled thud, as if something had been dropped. He waited, but the sound did not repeat, and after a moment, he continued on his way, his mind turning over the possibilities. The night deepened, and the blue train pressed on toward Nice, its passengers lulled by the rhythm of the journey. But beneath the surface, tension simmered. Derek Kettering, unable to sleep, paced his compartment, his thoughts a tangle of anger and desperation. His marriage to Ruth had been a mistake from the start, a union born of convenience rather than love. Her father's wealth had been a law, but now it was a chain, binding him to a woman he could no longer stand. The ruby, that cursed gem, was a symbol of everything he resented: Ruth's independence, her father's control, and the whispers of scandal that followed him wherever he went. He poured himself another drink, the amber liquid burning his throat as he tried to drown out the thoughts that plagued him. In the next carriage, Morel reclined on her berth, her silk robe slipping from her shoulder as she stared at the ceiling. She was a woman accustomed to getting what she wanted, but Derek's rejection had stung. She had fought him hers, body and soul, but his obsession with Ruth, or rather, with Ruth's fortune, had driven a wedge between them. Morel's lips curved in a bitter smile as she considered her options. There were other men, other opportunities, but none quite so enticing as the drama unfolding on this train. She had seen the ruby, had heard the whispers of its curse, and a part of her wondered if it might yet play a role in her plans. Catherine, too, was awake, her mind restless as she replayed the events of the evening. She had spoken briefly with Poirot in the dining car, his questions gentle but probing, as if he sensed she had seen more than she realized. She thought of the shadow in the corridor, the fleeting glimpse of movement that had unsettled her. Had it been Derek, as she suspected, or someone else entirely? She rose and pulled her shawl around her shoulders, deciding to take another walk through the train. The corridors were empty now, the passengers asleep or closeted in their compartments. As she passed Ruth's door, she hesitated, her hand hovering near the handle. A sudden impulse urged her to knock, but she stopped herself. It was late, and Ruth was likely asleep. Still, the feeling of unease grew stronger. A prickling at the back of her neck that she could not shake. Ada Mason, too, was restless. She had slipped into the corridor to check on her mistress, her steps silent on the carpeted floor. As she approached Ruth's compartment, she froze, her breath catching in her throat. There, in the dim light, was the shadow again, a figure, tall and indistinct, moving swiftly away from Ruth's door. Ada's heart pounded, but before she could call out, the figure vanished around a corner. She hurried to Ruth's door and knocked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Madam, are you all right?" There was no answer, only the steady hum of the train. Ada tried the handle, but the door was locked. She hesitated, torn between raising the alarm and respecting her mistress's privacy. In the end, she returned to her own compartment, resolving to speak to Ruth in the morning. The morning, however, would bring no such opportunity as the blue train pulled into Nice. The first rays of dawn illuminated the platform, casting long shadows across the gleaming rails. The passengers stirred, some eager to disembark, others lingering in the luxury of the train. A guard, making his rounds, knocked on Ruth Kettering's door to offer coffee. When there was no response, he knocked again, louder this time. The silence was deafening, a stark contrast to the bustle of the station outside. He called for the conductor, who unlocked the door with a master key. What they found inside would send shockwaves through the train, shattering the illusion of opulence and safety that the blue train promised. Poirot, alerted by the commotion, was among the first to arrive. The sight that greeted him was grim. Ruth Kettering lay lifeless on her berth, her face disfigured by a brutal blow, her eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. The velvet case that had held the heart of fire was open on the table, its contents gone. The compartment was otherwise undisturbed, the bed neatly made, Ruth's travelling bag untouched. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he took in the scene, his mind already racing through the possibilities. This was no random act of violence, he was certain. The ruby's absence, the precision of the blow, the locked door, all pointed to a carefully planned crime. Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming with interest. A shadow, you say? And what of the maid? Mademoiselle Mason? Did you see her last night? Catherine frowned, recalling Ada's nervous demeanour in the dining car. She was anxious, I think. She kept looking toward Ruth's compartment, as if she were expecting something. But I didn't see her in the corridor when I saw the shadow. Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign that his mind was at work. Merci, mademoiselle. You have been most helpful. I ask that you keep your eyes open, yes? There is much yet to uncover on this train. As the police began their investigation, the passengers were questioned, their alibis scrutinized. Derek Kettering, pale and shaken, denied any involvement, though his presence on the train and his strained marriage made him an obvious suspect. The Comte de la Roche, with his smooth assurances and vague answers, raised Poirot's suspicions, as did Morel's theatrical grief, which seemed more calculated than genuine. Ada Mason, trembling and tearful, recounted her story of the shadowy figure, but Poirot noted a flicker of hesitation in her eyes, a hint that she was holding something back. The heart of fire ruby, with its whispered curse, hung over the investigation, like a spectre. Was it the motive for the murder, or a convenient distraction? Poirot, with his meticulous methods and unerring instinct, knew that the truth lay not in the obvious clues, but in the shadows, the fleeting glances, the half-spoken truths, the secrets that the blue train carried through the night. As he stood in Ruth's compartment, his eyes scanning every detail, he felt the weight of the challenge before him. This was no ordinary crime, but a puzzle that would test even his formidable intellect. The train, now a crime scene, was detained in Nice, its passengers confined to their compartments or the dining car as the police worked. Poirot moved among them, his presence both comforting and unnerving, his questions gentle but relentless. He spoke to the conductor, who confirmed that the door had been locked from the inside, a detail that intrigued Poirot. He examined the cigarette case found in Ruth's compartment, its silver surface etched with the letter K. It was a damning piece of evidence against Derek, yet Poirot's instincts told him it was too neat, too convenient. As the day wore on, the passengers grew restless, their nerves frayed by the uncertainty and the whispers of the ruby's curse. Catherine, unable to shake the image of Ruth's lifeless body, found herself drawn to Poirot. Sensing that he alone could bring clarity to the chaos, she sought him out in the dining car, where he sat with a cup of coffee, his notebook open. Before him, Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice low. I can't help but feel that there's more to this than we're seeing. The ruby. The murder, it's all too perfect, isn't it? Poirot's eyes twinkled with approval. You have the mind of an observer, mademoiselle. Yes, it is too perfect. The crime is like a painting, carefully composed to draw the eye to the wrong details. But we shall find the truth. You and I, we shall follow the shadows until they lead us to the light. The investigation was only beginning, but already the threads of the mystery were tangling. weaving a web that stretched from the opulent interiors of the blue train to the sun-drenched shores of the Riviera. Poirot, with Catherine's unexpected assistance, was determined to unravel it, to find the truth hidden in the shadows on the rails. Chapter 4. A shocking discovery. Blue train glided into Nice, under a sky painted with the soft pinks and golds of dawn, its whistle a mournful cry that echoed across the platform. Passengers stirred in their compartments, some groggy from the overnight journey, others eager to disembark into the Riviera's warm embrace. The luxurious train, with its polished wood panelling and gleaming brass fittings, had carried its eclectic mix of travellers, aristocrats, opportunists, and one astute detective through the night. But as the station bustled with porters and the clatter of luggage, an unseen shadow hung over the morning's promise. Hercule Poirot, seated in his compartment, adjusted his impeccable moustache and surveyed the scene through the window. His sharp grey eyes, ever watchful, noted the flurry of activity, a porter juggling suitcases, a woman in a fur stole waving for a taxi, and a young man in a hurry, his hat pulled suspiciously low. Poirot's mind, never idle, catalogued these details, sensing that the journey's end would bring more than just a change of scenery. He had felt an undercurrent of unease aboard the train, a subtle discord among the passengers that his intuition could not dismiss. In the corridor, the train's guard, a weary man named Pierre Michel, moved with practiced efficiency, knocking on compartment doors to rouse the passengers. His uniform was crisp, his demeanour polite but firm, as befitted a man accustomed to the demands of the wealthy and titled. He paused at Ruth Kettering's compartment, number 12, and rapped sharply. "Madam Kettering, we have arrived in Nice. May I assist with your luggage?" There was no response. He knocked again, louder this time, his brow furrowing. "Madam, inside." The compartment, silence reigned. The curtains were drawn, the bed neatly made as if untouched. Pierre hesitated, then turned the handle. The door was unlocked, a detail that struck him as odd, given the value of the passenger's possessions. He stepped inside, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. The air felt heavy, charged with an indefinable wrongness. His gaze fell on the figure slumped against the velvet upholstered seat. Ruth Kettering was dead. Her body was positioned unnaturally, one arm dangling limply, her head tilted at an awkward angle. Her face, once striking with its bold American features, was marred by a brutal blow that had left it almost unrecognizable. Blood had pooled on the floor, staining the plush carpet, and her eyes stared blankly, fixed in a moment of terror. Pierre's breath caught in his throat. He stumbled back, his hand fumbling for the door frame, and let out a shout that reverberated down the corridor. "Mon Dieu! Help! Someone help!" The cry drew a crowd. Passengers in various states of dress peered from their compartments, their curiosity tinged with alarm. Catherine Grey, the unassuming heiress with a knack for observation, emerged from her compartment, her calm demeanour belying the shock in her hazel eyes. Morel, the flamboyant dancer, appeared in a silk robe, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders, her expression a mix of intrigue and horror. Even Derek Kettering, Ruth's estranged husband, materialized, his face pale but unreadable as he pushed through the gathering onlookers. Poirot, alerted by the commotion, moved swiftly to the scene. His small, precise steps belied the urgency in his eyes. "Monsieur Michel, what has happened?" he asked, his voice calm but commanding. The guard, trembling, gestured toward the compartment. "It's Madame Kettering, Monsieur Poirot. She is dead. Murdered, I think." Poirot's expression remained impassive, but his mind was already racing, piecing together the fragments of the moment. He stepped into the compartment, his gaze sweeping over the scene with clinical precision. The disfigurement of Ruth's face suggested a violent, personal attack, yet the neatness of the compartment, save for the blood, hinted at calculation. His eyes lingered on the empty velvet case on the table, where the heart of fire ruby should have been. The legendary gem, with its blood-red glow and whispered curse, was gone. "Messieurs, mesdames, please step back," Poirot said, raising a hand to the crowd. "This is now a matter for the police. Monsieur Michel, Ensure no one enters this compartment until the authorities arrive." The guard nodded, still shaken, and began ushering passengers away. Poirot turned to Catherine Grey, who stood quietly at the edge of the scene, her hands clasped. "Mademoiselle Grey, you have a keen eye. Did you notice anything unusual during the night? Any sounds, any movements?" Catherine hesitated, her brow creasing. "I heard footsteps in the corridor, perhaps around midnight, but I thought it was just the staff. And I saw Monsieur Kettering near this end of the carriage late last night. He seemed agitated, but I couldn't say why." Poirot nodded, filing the information away. "Merci, mademoiselle. Your observations may prove invaluable." As the station filled with the wail of police sirens, word of the murder spread like wildfire. Rufus van Aldine, Ruth's father, arrived within the hour, his broad American frame cutting through the crowd. His face was a storm of grief and fury, his eyes red-rimmed but blazing with determination. Beside him stood Major Knighton, his loyal secretary, whose calm demeanour contrasted sharply with his employer's volatility. "Who did this?" Van Aldine demanded, his voice booming as he confronted Poirot. "My daughter, my Ruth murdered. And that damned ruby gone? I want answers, Monsieur Poirot, and I want them now." Poirot met the millionaire's gaze with a steady calm. "Monsieur Van Aldine, I assure you, I will uncover the truth. But we must proceed with order and method. The police will conduct their investigation, and I will assist. Tell me, when did you last speak with your daughter?" Van Alden's shoulders slumped slightly, the weight of his loss settling in. "Yesterday. Before she boarded. She was distracted. Said she needed this trip to clear her head. Her marriage to that scoundrel Kettering was falling apart. I told her to leave him, to start fresh. And that ruby." His voice cracked. "I thought it would make her happy, not bring her to this." Poirot nodded, his mind noting the emotional undercurrents. "And the ruby, monsieur, did anyone else know she carried it?" "Only her maid. Ada Mason and maybe Derek," Van Aldine said. "I trusted Mason implicitly. She's been with Ruth for years. As for Derek," his face darkened, "that man's no good. He's in debt up to his ears, and I wouldn't put it past him to—" "We must not jump to conclusions," Poirot interrupted gently. "The truth reveals itself in time, not in haste. The French police, led by Commissaire Coe, a weary man with a penchant for efficiency, arrived to secure the scene. Coe, familiar with Poirot's reputation, greeted him with a mix of respect and wariness. "Monsieur Poirot, you are involved in this matter. A private inquiry, perhaps?" "An interested observer for now," Poirot replied, his tone neutral. "Monsieur Van Aldine has requested my assistance, and I am inclined to offer it. May I examine the compartment?" Coe nodded, and Poirot returned to the scene, his eyes darting over every detail. The blood on the carpet had dried, forming a grim outline of the crime. Ruth's handbag lay open, its contents undisturbed except for the missing ruby case. A single cigarette case engraved with the letter K caught his attention. Tucked beneath the seat, he crouched to inspect it, careful not to touch it. Until the police had taken photographs, interesting, Poirot murmured, "A clue, perhaps, or a distraction." Coe joined him, peering at the cigarette case. "This points to Kettering." "Does it not?" The husband, estranged with motive and opportunity. Poirot's lips twitched in a faint smile. "It is very convenient, is it not, Commissaire? A clue so neatly placed, as if begging to be found. The little grey cells, they whisper that this is too simple." Coe raised an eyebrow, but said nothing, directing his men to bag the evidence. Poirot's gaze shifted to the window, slightly ajar, admitting a faint breeze. He leaned closer, noting a smudge on the frame barely perceptible, but possibly a fingerprint. He made a mental note to have it examined. As the police worked, Poirot sought out Ada Mason, Ruth's maid, who stood trembling in the corridor, her face pale beneath her neat cap. "Mademoiselle Mason, you were close to Madame Kettering. Tell me, what did you see last night?" Ada twisted her hands, her voice unsteady. I don't know, sir. I helped Madame to bed around 10. She seemed nervous, kept touching the ruby case. I left her alone and went to my own compartment. But later, I thought I saw a man, maybe near her door. It was dark, and I couldn't be sure. A man, Poirot pressed. Can you describe him? It was too shadowy, sir. I only saw a figure, tall, moving quickly. I thought it might be Monsieur Kettering, but I didn't want to assume. Her voice trailed off, her eyes darting nervously. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. Merci, mademoiselle. You have been most helpful. The investigation gained momentum as the police interviewed passengers. Derek Kettering, his jaw set and eyes defiant, denied entering Ruth's compartment. I was in the dining car most of the night, he said, his tone clipped. Asked the steward. I had no reason to see her. And yet, monsieur, Poirot said, his voice soft but piercing. A cigarette case with your initial was found in her compartment. How do you explain this? Derek's face flushed. I don't. Someone must have planted it. I haven't used the case in months. Poirot's eyes narrowed, but he let the matter drop for now. He turned his attention to the other passengers, each a potential piece in the puzzle. Morel. The dancer fluttered her lashes in claimed ignorance, though her sharp eyes suggested. She saw more than she admitted. The Comte de la Roche, Ruth's former lover, was suave but evasive, insisting he had no contact with her on the train. Catherine Grey, however, remained a quiet ally, her observations sharp and her demeanour trustworthy daughters. The morning wore on. Rufus van Alden's grief hardened into resolve. He cornered Poirot outside the station, his voice low and urgent. I don't care what it costs. Poirot, find who did this. That ruby was cursed, I see that now. But someone used it as an excuse to kill my girl. I want them brought to justice. Poirot inclined his head. Monsieur, I give you my word. Hercule Poirot will not rest until the truth is uncovered. The ruby. The murder they are threads in a tapestry, and I shall unravel it. The station platform emptied as passengers dispersed, but the weight of the crime lingered. Poirot stood alone for a moment, his mind a whirl of possibilities. The heart of fire was more than a jewel, it was a catalyst, drawing out greed, betrayal, and perhaps something darker. The cigarette case, the shadowy figure, the smudged window, all were clues, but none yet formed a complete picture. He thought of Catherine Grey's quiet strength, Ada Mason's nervous glances, and Derek Kettering's defiant stare. Somewhere among them lay the key to the mystery. The Riviera sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the platform. Poirot adjusted his hat and turned toward the town, where answers awaited. The blue train, now silent, stood as a monument to a journey that had ended in tragedy. But for Hercule Poirot, the journey was just beginning. The police cordoned off the train, their voices a low hum as they catalogued evidence and questioned witnesses. Commissaire Coe, though competent, relied on procedure, while Poirot's approach was altogether different. He saw the crime not as a collection of facts but as a story, one with characters, motives, and hidden truths. The disfigurement of Ruth's face troubled him. It suggested not just violence, but a desire to erase her identity, to make her unrecognizable. Was it rage, or something more calculated? He sought out Catherine Grey again, finding her seated in the station's waiting room, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Mademoiselle, you have a gift for seeing what others miss. Tell me more about Monsieur Kettering's behavior last night. Catherine's eyes met his, steady and thoughtful. He was restless, Monsieur Poirot. I saw him pacing near the dining car around 11. He kept looking toward the sleeping carriages as if waiting for someone. But there was something else. A boy, a young porter, I think, slipped out of the train just before we arrived. He looked nervous, carrying a small bag. I don't know if it's important, but it struck me as odd. Poirot's mustache twitched. A boy, you say? Most interesting. And Madame Kettering, did you speak with her during the journey? Only briefly, Catherine said. She seemed distracted, almost frightened. She mentioned the ruby once, said it felt heavy, like it carried a weight beyond its size. I thought she meant its value, but now... Her voice trailed off, her expression troubled. Poirot nodded, his mind turning over the new information. A nervous boy, a frightened woman, a missing ruby, and a cigarette case conveniently placed. The pieces were disparate, but he sensed a pattern forming, like the first brushstrokes on a canvas. He thanked Catherine and made his way to the police tent, where Coe was reviewing preliminary findings. The coroner estimates the time of death between midnight and 2 a.m., Coe said, glancing at Poirot. A single blow to the head, delivered with great force. The ruby case was empty, but her other jewels earrings were untouched. This was no random theft. Indeed, Poirot murmured, the ruby was the target. But the murder, it feels personal. Tell me, Commissaire, have you examined the window smudge? Coe frowned. A smudge? We noted it, but it's faint. Likely from a glove, not a fingerprint. You think it's significant. Everything is significant until proven otherwise, Poirot said. I would also like to speak with the porter, the young boy Mademoiselle Gray mentioned. He may have seen something or someone. Coe dispatched an officer to locate the boy, though Poirot suspected he might have already vanished into the Riviero's crowded streets. The investigation was moving quickly, but Poirot preferred a slower, more deliberate pace. He needed to understand the passengers, their secrets, their connections. Ruth Kettering's life and death were a puzzle, and a ruby was only one. Piece dot as the day progressed, the police focused on Derek Kettering, whose motive seemed clear: a failing marriage, mounting debts, and the promise of inheritance. His presence on the train, coupled with the cigarette case, made him the obvious suspect. Yet Poirot's instincts rebelled against the simplicity of it all. A man like Derek, reckless and impulsive, might kill in a fit of passion, but would he leave such an incriminating clue? And why disfigure the face? The act felt deliberate, almost theatrical, as if meant to send a message. Poirot returned to the train, now under heavy guard, and examined the compartment again. The blood stains had been photographed, the cigarette case removed, but the smudged window remained untouched. He leaned closer, his keen eyes searching for any trace of evidence. A faint scent lingered: cologne, perhaps, or something chemical. He made a note to have it analyzed, though he doubted it would yield much. The killer had been careful, but no one was perfect. Outside, Rufus van Aldine paced like a caged lion, his secretary, Major Knighton, at his side. Knighton, a tall man with a military bearing, spoke softly to calm his employer, but his eyes flicked toward Poirot with a guarded curiosity. Poirot noted this, wondering about the secretary's role. Was he merely a loyal aide or something more? Monsieur Poirot, Van Aldine said, approaching. The police are wasting time. It's Kettering. I'm sure of it. He's always been trouble. I told Ruth to divorce him, but she wouldn't listen. Now look what's happened. Poirot raised a hand. Monsieur, I understand your grief, but we must not let emotion cloud judgment. Monsieur Kettering is a suspect, yes, but there are others. The Comte de la Roche, for instance, his interest in jewels is well known. And Mademoiselle Morel, she has her own reasons to resent your daughter. Even the maid, Ada Mason, may know more than she says. Van Alden's eyes narrowed. You think this goes deeper, some kind of conspiracy? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Let us say, monsieur, that the heart of fire has a way of igniting passions. I will find the truth, but it will require patience. The day stretched into afternoon, the Riviera sun relentless in its brightness. Poirot interviewed more passengers, each adding a fragment to the mosaic. Morel, with her theatrical flair, admitted to seeing Derek in the dining car, but claimed ignorance of anything else. The Comte de la Roche, suave and elusive, denied any involvement with Ruth, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease when the ruby was mentioned. Ada Mason, meanwhile, grew increasingly nervous, her story shifting slightly with each retelling. Catherine Gray remained Poirot's most reliable ally. Her quiet demeanor hid a sharp mind, and her observations about the passengers Derek's agitation, the boy's hurried exit, Ruth's fear were proving invaluable. Poirot began to suspect that the key to the case lay not in the ruby's theft, but in the relationships it exposed. Ruth's death was no simple crime of greed. It was a tapestry of betrayal woven with threads of love, jealousy, and revenge as evening fell. The police arrested Derek Kettering, citing the cigarette case and his lack of a solid alibi. The news spread quickly, whispered among the passengers, and staff. Van Aldine, though grimly satisfied, seemed unconvinced that justice was complete. Poirot, too, felt the puzzle was far from solved. The cigarette case was a clue, yes, but it was too perfect to deliberate, and the boy Catherine had. Seen where had he gone? What had he carried in that bag? Chapter 5. The prime suspect morning sun bathed the platform at night in a golden haze, but the warmth did little to dispel the chill that had settled over the passengers of the blue train. The luxurious journey, meant to be a parade of opulence and leisure, had been shattered by the grim discovery of Ruth Kettering's lifeless body. The news spread like wildfire among the travellers, whispered in hushed tones by porters and passengers alike as the French police swarmed the scene, their voices sharp and urgent. Hercule Poirot, ever the observer, stood at the edge of the platform, his small, precise figure a stark contrast to the chaos around him. His green eyes gleamed with quiet intensity, taking in every detail the nervous glances of the passengers, the clipped efficiency of the police, and the heavy air of suspicion that hung over them all. The station was a hive of activity, uniformed. Officers cordoned off the area around Ruth's compartment, their movements brisk as they catalogued evidence and interviewed the train's staff. Rufus van Aldine, Ruth's father, had arrived from Paris by a private car, his face a mask of grief and fury. His secretary, Major Knighton, trailed behind him, his expression one of practiced calm, though his eyes darted nervously toward the train. Van Aldine's voice boomed across the platform as he demanded answers, his American accent cutting through the murmurs. "I want justice for my daughter," he declared, his fists clenched. "Whoever did this will pay." Poirot, standing near a wrought iron bench, adjusted his hat and watched Van Aldine's outburst with interest. The man's grief was genuine, but there was something else on edge of determination that suggested he would not rest until the killer was found. Poirot's gaze shifted to Derek Kettering, Ruth's estranged husband, who stood apart from the others, his handsome face pale and drawn. Derek's dark suit was slightly rumpled, as though he had slept in it, and his hands fidgeted with a cigarette he had yet to light. The police had already taken a keen interest in him, and it was no secret why not the discovery of a cigarette case in Ruth's compartment engraved with the letter K had sent ripples of suspicion through the investigation. It was a damning piece of evidence, and the French inspector, a weary man named Commissaire Co, was quick to seize upon it. Co, with his neatly trimmed mustache and sharp, probing eyes, approached Derek with the air of a predator circling its prey. "Monsieur Kettering," he said, his voice clipped, "this cigarette case yours, I presume?" Derek's jaw tightened, but he met the inspector's gaze without flinching. "It's mine," he admitted, his voice low and steady, "but I haven't seen it since last night. I must have dropped it somewhere." "Somewhere." Co raised an eyebrow, his tone dripping with skepticism. "In your wife's compartment, perhaps? Where she was found dead this morning?" The accusation hung in the air, and a murmur rippled through the gathered crowd. Derek's eyes narrowed, but he held his ground. "I wasn't in her compartment last night," he said firmly. "I was in the dining car until late, then in my own compartment. You can ask the steward." "We will," Co replied, jotting a note in his small black book. "But you understand, monsieur, that your wife's death benefits you greatly. No more alimony disputes, no more public scandals, and this cigarette case places you at the scene." Poirot, standing a few paces away, tilted his head slightly, his fingers brushing the brim of his hat. The evidence was compelling, yes, but it was also, to neat, the cigarette case, left so conveniently in Ruth's compartment, seemed almost staged, as though someone wanted Derek to be the obvious suspect. Poirot's mind, always attuned to the subtleties of human behavior, noted the way Derek's hands trembled slightly as he lit his cigarette, a sign of nerves, perhaps, but not necessarily guilt. There was more to this, Poirot was certain, and he intended to find it. As the police continued their questioning, Poirot turned his attention to the other passengers, who had gathered in small clusters on the platform. Catherine Grey stood near, the edge of the group, her quiet demeanour a stark contrast to the flamboyant Morel, who was gesticulating dramatically to a young officer, her voice carrying a mix of indignation and theatrics. Catherine's eyes met Poirot's for a moment, and he noted the intelligence in her gaze. She was no mere bystander, this one. Her recent inheritance had given her a new lease on life, but it was her sharp observation that intrigued Poirot most. He made a mental note to speak with her later. The Comte de la Roche, Ruth's former lover, was another figure of interest. He stood apart, his aristocratic features composed, but his eyes restless. His reputation as a charming rogue with a penchant for expensive jewels was well known, and Poirot wondered if the heart of fire ruby had drawn him into this web of intrigue. The Comte's alibi was vague. He claimed to have been in the smoking car for much of the night, but no one could fully corroborate his story. Then there was Ada Mason, Ruth's maid, who had been the first to raise the alarm about her shadowy figure near Ruth's compartment. Ada was a thin, nervous woman with a habit of wringing her hands, and her account of the night's events had been delivered with a tremor in her voice. "I saw someone, sir," she had told the police, her eyes wide. "A man, I think, near Madane's door. It was dark, but I'm sure of it." Her story was plausible, but Poirot's instincts told him there was something rehearsed about her delivery, as though she were reciting lines, rather than recounting a memory. As the morning wore on, the police continued their interviews, and Poirot took the opportunity to observe from the sidelines. He approached Rufus van Aldine, who was pacing near the station's entrance, his face etched with pain. "Monsieur van Aldine," Poirot said, his voice soft but commanding, "I am deeply sorry for your loss. If you will permit me, I should like to offer my services in this matter." Hercule Poirot does not rest when justice is at stake. Van Aldine stopped pacing and studied Poirot, his eyes narrowing. "You're that detective, aren't you? The one who solved the Orient Express case?" Poirot inclined his head modestly. "I have had some small successes, oui, and I believe I can be of assistance here. The murder of your daughter is no simple crime, monsieur. There are complexities, threads that must be unravelled." Van Alden's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Fine. Do what you can, Poirot. I want the bastard who did this court, and I want that ruby back. It's not just a jewel, it's a symbol of everything Ruth was to me." Poirot bowed slightly. "I understand, monsieur. I will begin at once." With Van Alden's blessing, Poirot set to work, his first task being to interview the key players. He started with Derek Kettering, who was now under close watch by the police. They met in a small waiting room at the station, its walls adorned with faded posters of the Riviera's beaches. Derek sat slouched in a chair, his cigarette now a stub between his fingers. "Monsieur Kettering," Poirot began, settling into a chair opposite him, "you are in a most unfortunate position. The cigarette case, the motive it all points to you. Yet I sense there is more to this story. Tell me, where were you last night, truly?" Derek's eyes flickered with defiance. "I told the police already. I was in the dining car until after midnight. Then I went to my compartment. I didn't see Ruth, and I certainly didn't kill her." Poirot leaned forward, his voice gentle but probing. "And the cigarette case? How did it find its way to your wife's compartment?" "I don't know," Derek snapped, his voice rising. "Someone must have taken it. I'm not an idiot. I wouldn't leave something like that behind if I'd done it." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "A reasonable point, monsieur. But tell me, what was your relationship with Madame Kettering like? The police say it was strained." Derek's expression darkened. "We had our problems. Everyone knows that. Ruth was going to divorce me, and I wasn't exactly heartbroken about it. But I didn't want her dead. I'm not a monster." Poirot studied him for a moment, noting the mix of anger and sorrow in his eyes. Derek was a man under pressure, but whether that pressure came from guilt or injustice, Poirot could not yet say. "Very well," he said, rising. "I will speak with you again, monsieur. For now, I advise you to remain calm. The truth has a way of revealing itself. Next, Poirot sought out Ada Mason, who was sitting on a bench outside the station, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her plain grey dress and pinched expression made her seem almost invisible. But Poirot knew better than to underestimate anyone. "Mademoiselle Mason," he said, sitting beside her, "you have been most helpful to the police with your account of the shadowy figure, but I would like to hear it again in your own words." Ada's eyes darted nervously to the side before meeting Poirot's. "It was just as I said, sir. I was coming back from the dining car, and I saw someone near Madame's door. It was dark, but I'm sure it was a man. He moved quickly, like he didn't want to be seen." Poirot tilted his head, his mustache twitching slightly. "And this figure, you did not recognize him? Not even a silhouette that might suggest, say, Monsieur Kettering?" Ada shook her head vigorously. "No, sir. I couldn't see his face. It was too dark." "Curio," Poirot murmured. "And yet you are certain it was a man, not, perhaps, a woman in a cloak, or someone else entirely?" Ada hesitated, her fingers twisting the hem of her dress. I suppose it could have been anyone, but I thought it was a man." Poirot smiled faintly, his mind cataloguing the hesitation in her voice. "Thank you, mademoiselle. You have been most helpful." As he walked away, Poirot's thoughts churned. Ada's story was plausible, but her nervousness suggested she was holding something back. Was she protecting someone, or was she herself part of the puzzle? The cigarette case, the shadowy figure, the missing ruby, all were pieces of a larger picture, and Poirot was determined to assemble them. His next stop was the Comte de la Roche, who was lounging near a cafe on the platform, his silk scarf fluttering in the breeze. The Comte's charm was undeniable, but Poirot sensed a calculating mind behind the easy smile. "Monsieur le Comte," Poirot said, approaching, "you were a friend of Madame Kettering, were you not?" The Comte's smile widened, but his eyes remained guarded. "A friend, yes. Ruth was a delightful woman. It's a tragedy. What happened?" "Indeed," Poirot said, his tone neutral. "And the heart of fire ruby, you were aware of it, I presume. A jewel of such value must interest a man of your tastes." The Comte's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "I heard of it, yes. A magnificent stone. But I had no part in its disappearance, if that's what you're implying." Poirot raised a hand, his expression placating. "I imply nothing, monsieur. I merely seek the truth. Where were you last night, during the hours when Madame Kettering met her?" "Unfortunate end?" "In the smoking car," the Comte replied smoothly. "I enjoy a cigar before bed. Several passengers saw me there." "Been?" Poirot said, nodding. "And did you see Madame Kettering at all during the journey?" The Comte hesitated, then shrugged. "Briefly, in the dining car. We exchanged pleasantries, nothing more." Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly, but he let the matter drop. The Comte was slippery, his answers polished to a fault. There was something he was not saying, but Poirot would need more than suspicion to pin him down. As the day progressed, Poirot continued his interviews, piecing together the movements of the passengers. Morel, the flamboyant dancer, was a whirlwind of emotion, her account of the night filled with dramatic flourishes but little substance. She claimed to have been in her compartment, practicing dance steps, but her alibi was shaky, and her bitterness toward Derek was palpable. "He's a snake," she spat, her eyes flashing. "He used Ruth for her money, and now he's free of her. Convenient, non?" Poirot listened patiently, noting the venom in her words. Morel's anger could be genuine, or it could be a performance to deflect suspicion. Either way, she was a piece of the puzzle, and Poirot would not dismiss her lightly. By late afternoon, the police had formally detained Derek Kettering. Citing the cigarette case and his financial motive as sufficient grounds, the platform buzzed with gossip, and the passengers began to disperse, some to hotels in Nice, others to continue their journeys. Poirot, however, remained, his mind racing with possibilities. The cigarette case was too obvious, the shadowy figure too vague. The Ruby's theft and Ruth's murder might be connected, But Poirot suspected they were not the whole story. There was a pattern here, a design, and he would find it as the sun dipped below the horizon. Casting long shadows across the platform, Poirot approached Catherine Grey, who was sitting quietly with a book in her lap. Mademoiselle Grey, he said, his voice warm. You have a keen eye, I think. Tell me, what have you observed among our fellow passengers? Catherine looked up, her expression thoughtful. I've noticed a lot of tension, she said slowly. Derek Kettering was near Ruth's compartment last night. I saw him myself, though he didn't see me. But there's something about Ada Mason that doesn't sit right. She's too nervous, and her story about the shadowy figure. It feels rehearsed. Poirot's eyes gleamed. You are perceptive, mademoiselle. I, too, have my doubts about Mademoiselle Mason. And what of the others? The Comte, perhaps? Or Mademoiselle Morel? Catherine hesitated, then leaned forward. The Comte is charming, but he's hiding something. I saw him speaking with a porter in a way that seemed secretive. As for Morel, she's angry, but I don't think she's a killer. She's too emotional to open. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing her observations. You have done well, mademoiselle. Your insights are most valuable. I may call upon you again, if you permit. Catherine smiled faintly. Of course, Monsieur Poirot. I want to help. As Poirot walked away, his thoughts were a whirl of connections and contradictions. The cigarette case pointed to Derek, but its presence was too convenient. Ada's story was shaky, the Comte's alibi questionable, and Morel's emotions volatile. And then there was the ruby, the heart of fire, a jewel with a curse that seemed to weave through every thread of this mystery. Was it a motive, or was it a distraction? Poirot's little grey cells hummed with activity, piecing together the fragments of a puzzle that was far from complete. The platform was nearly empty now, the police having finished their initial sweep. Rufus van Aldine approached Poirot, his face haggard. Well, Poirot, any progress? Poirot turned, his expression calm but resolute. Monsieur van Aldine, the truth is like a fine tapestry. Each thread must be examined, each knot untangled. I am only beginning, but I assure you, I will find the one who took your daughter's life. Van Aldine nodded, his eyes burning with determination. Do it, Poirot. For Ruth. As the stars began to twinkle above Nice, Poirot stood alone, his mind a battlefield of theories and suspicions. The blue train, once a symbol of luxury, was now a stage for murder, and Hercule Poirot was determined to unmask the killer hiding in its shadows. Chapter 6. Catherine's inside blue train glided through the French countryside, its rhythmic clatter a backdrop to the simmering tensions within its opulent carriages. The morning sun filtered through the heavy velvet curtains of the dining car, casting golden streaks across the polished mahogany tables. Hercule Poirot sat at a corner table, his small, precise hands folded neatly over a cup of café au lait. His sharp, green eyes, ever watchful, scanned the room with the practiced ease of a man who missed nothing. Across from him sat Catherine Grey, her posture composed but her gaze alert, taking in the same scene with a quiet intensity that Poirot found intriguing. Catherine, a woman in her early 30s with a face that suggested both intelligence and restraint, had become an unexpected ally in Poirot's observations. Her recent inheritance had granted her a newfound freedom, but it was a clarity of thought that drew Poirot's attention. She was not swayed by the glamour of the blue train's passengers, or the whispers of the heart of fire Ruby's curse. Instead, she observed with a detachment that mirrored Poirot's own, though hers was tempered by a warmth he lacked. Mademoiselle Grey, Poirot began, his voice low but clear. You have the gift of seeing what others overlook. Tell me, what have you noticed among our fellow travellers since we departed London? Catherine's lips curved into a faint smile, as if she had anticipated the question. She set down her teacup, her movements deliberate. Monsieur Poirot, I've noticed that people on this train are not what they seem. Take Mrs. Kettering, for instance. She wore her wealth like a shield, but her eyes betrayed her unhappy, restless, perhaps even afraid. And her husband, Mr. Kettering. She paused, her brow furrowing slightly. He was near her compartment last night. You know, I saw him pacing in the corridor, just before midnight. Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle sign of his interest. Pacing, you say? And what was his demeanour? Agitated, Catherine replied without hesitation. He kept glancing at the door to Ruth's compartment, as if he wanted to go in but couldn't bring himself to do it. He was smoking, too nervously, I'd say. The cigarette case in his hand had a distinct K engraved on it. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A cigarette case with a K, most interesting. And what of the maid? Ada Mason. She, too, has caught your eye, has she not? Catherine nodded, her expression growing more serious. There's something off about her, Monsieur Poirot. She's too perfect in her role to deferential, to composed. Last night, when I passed by Ruth's compartment, I overheard her speaking to someone. Her tone wasn't that of a servant. It was commanding, almost, and she mentioned something about the plan going smoothly. I couldn't hear more, but it struck me as odd. Poirot leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled. The plan, you say? Oui, mademoiselle. You confirm what my little grey cells have begun to suspect. There is a thread here, a thread that connects the ruby, the murder, and perhaps something more. But tell me, what else have you seen? The other passengers, do they play a part in this drama? Catherine's gaze drifted to the dining car, where the other passengers were engaged in their morning routines. The flamboyant dancer Morel, draped in a silk shawl that barely concealed her vibrant energy, was laughing loudly at a table with a young man who seemed both charmed and overwhelmed. The Comte de la Roche, sleek and polished, sat alone, his eyes fixed on a newspaper, but his attention clearly elsewhere. Major Knighton, Rufus van Alden's secretary, was at another table, his face pale and drawn, as if he hadn't slept. Morel is a performer, Catherine said thoughtfully. She wants everyone to notice her, but I think it's a distraction. She's watching everyone as closely as we are. The Comte, he's too smooth, too careful. I don't trust him. And Major Knighton, he seems nervous, almost guilty. I saw him speaking to Ada Mason this morning, and they both stopped talking the moment they noticed me. Poirot's nod was almost imperceptible. You have the makings of a detective, Mademoiselle Gray. Your observations are precise, and your instincts are sound. Now, let us consider the maid's story. Ada Mason claims she saw a man enter Madame Kettering's compartment last night. Yes? But you say her account is inconsistent. Explain. Catherine took a sip of her tea, gathering her thoughts. Ada said she saw a man in a dark coat enter Ruth's compartment around 1 in the morning. She claimed she couldn't see his face, but she was certain it was a man. Yet when I passed by earlier, around midnight, I saw no such figure, only Derek Kettering, and he was outside, not entering. If Ada's story is true, why didn't I see this mysterious man? And why was she so quick to report it to the guard this morning? Almost as if she wanted to make sure everyone knew? Poirot's eyes narrowed. You suggest she is planting suspicion, perhaps to divert attention. A clever theory. And what of the ruby, the heart of fire? Do you believe its theft is the motive for this crime? Catherine hesitated, her fingers tracing the rim of her teacup. I'm not sure. The ruby is valuable, of course, and its curse makes it a convenient scapegoat. But Ruth's death feels personal. The way her face was disfigured, it wasn't just about killing her. It was about destroying her. That kind of violence suggests hatred, not greed. Poirot's mustache quivered with approval. You see the human heart, mademoiselle, and that is where the truth often lies. The ruby may be a distraction, a glittering lure to blind us to the real motive. But come, let us walk the corridors of this train. I wish to see the scene of the crime once more, and your eyes may catch what mine have missed. They rose from the table, Poirot's small, dapper figure a stark contrast to Catherine's quiet elegance. The blue train's corridors were narrow, but luxurious, lined with polished wood and brass fittings. As they approached Ruth Kettering's compartment, now sealed by the French police, Poirot paused, his head tilted as if listening to the train itself. The compartment, it tells her. Story? He murmured. But the story is not complete. The guard has allowed me access, thanks to Monsieur Van Alden's influence. Let us see what secrets remain. The guard, a stern-faced man with a waxed mustache, unlocked the door and stepped aside. The compartment was as Ruth had left it, save for the absence of her body. The bed was neatly made, the velvet curtains drawn back to reveal a view of the passing countryside. A faint scent of perfume lingered in the air, mingling with something sharper, perhaps the residue of fear. Poirot's eyes swept the room, taking in every detail: the small travelling case, the empty jewel box where the heart of fire had been stored, the faint smudge on the mirror. Catherine stood near the door, her gaze fixed on the floor where a small, crumpled piece of paper lay half hidden beneath the bed. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, bending to retrieve it. "Look at this." She handed him the paper, a torn scrap, with a few handwritten words. "Must be done tonight." The ink was smudged, but the handwriting was elegant, almost feminine. Poirot's eyebrows rose. A clue, mademoiselle, and a significant one. This is not the hand of Madame Kettering, nor of her husband. But whose? We must compare it to other writings. And yet, it confirms your suspicion of a plan that was executed with precision. Catherine frowned. But why leave it here? If it's part of a conspiracy, wouldn't they be more careful? Perhaps, Poirot said, his voice soft but intense. It was meant to be found, or perhaps it was dropped in haste. The mind of the criminal is not always as orderly as mine. He smiled faintly, but his eyes were serious. Come, let us speak to Ada Mason again. Her story, I think, is the key to unraveling this tangle. They found Ada Mason in the dining car, sitting alone with a cup of tea. She was a slight woman, her dark hair pulled back severely, her face pale and unremarkable to unremarkable, Poirot thought, for a maid in such a high-profile position. She looked up as they approached, her expression a perfect mask of deference. "Monsieur Poirot." "Miss Grey," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Is there something I can do for you?" Poirot sat across from her, his demeanour polite, but probing. "Mademoiselle Mason, you have told the police of a man entering Madame Kettering's compartment last night. I wish to hear the story again in your own words." Ada's hands tightened around her teacup, a fleeting gesture that Catherine noticed but Poirot seemed to ignore. "It was about 1 in the morning, sir," she began. "I was returning from the lavatory when I saw a man in a dark coat slip into Mrs. Kettering's compartment. I couldn't see his face, he was too quick. I thought it might be Mr. Kettering, but I wasn't sure. I didn't want to cause a scene, so I waited until morning to report it." Poirot nodded, his face unreadable. "And you are certain of the time? 1 o'clock? Yes, sir." Ada replied, her eyes meeting his briefly before dropping to her cup. Catherine spoke up, her voice calm but pointed. "Miss Mason, I was in the corridor around midnight, and I didn't see anyone enter Mrs. Kettering's compartment." "How do you explain that?" Ada's composure faltered for a moment, her lips parting as if to protest. I must have been mistaken about the time, Miss Grey. It was late, and I was tired. Perhaps it was closer to 1:30. Poirot's smile was almost imperceptible. A small discrepancy, but an important one. "Tell me, Mademoiselle Mason, did you know of the Heart of Fire ruby? Did Madame Kettering speak of it to you?" Ada shook her head quickly. "No, sir. She mentioned it was valuable, but I never saw it. She kept it locked in her jewel case. And yet," Poirot said, his voice soft as velvet, "the jewel case was found empty, and you, her maid, saw nothing, heard nothing." A curious lapse for one so attentive. Ada's face flushed, but she held her ground. "I was in my own compartment most of the night, sir. I can't be everywhere at once." Poirot rose, his movements graceful but final. "Merci, Mademoiselle Mason. You have been most helpful." As they left the dining car, Catherine glanced at Poirot. "She's lying, isn't she?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Lying, mademoiselle. Perhaps, or perhaps she is merely selective with the truth. We shall see. But for now, let us consider the Comte de la Roche. His interest in jewels is well known, and his presence on this train is no coincidence. I think it is time we had a little chat with him." The Comte de la Roche was in the lounge car, reclining, in a plush armchair with a glass of cognac in hand. His tailored suit and slicked-back hair gave him an air of effortless charm, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. He rose as Poirot and Catherine approached, his smile polite but guarded. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Poirot's bow was slight but courteous. "Monsieur le Comte, I am investigating the unfortunate death of Madame Kettering. You knew her, I believe?" The Comte's smile faltered, but he recovered quickly. "Only in passing. We met at a few social gatherings in Paris. She was charming, but troubled. Her marriage, you know, it was not a happy one. And the heart of fire?" Poirot asked, his tone casual but his eyes piercing. "You are a connoisseur of jewels, are you not? Did Madame Kettering show you her ruby?" The Comte laughed, a sound that was both amused and dismissive. "A ruby? No, Monsieur Poirot, she did not. I heard of it. Of course, who hasn't? But I have no interest in cursed stones. My tastes run to more attainable treasures." Catherine watched him closely, noting the slight tension in his jaw. "And where were you last night?" "Comte," she asked, her voice gentle but direct. "Around 1 in the morning, perhaps." The Comte's eyes flicked to her, a flash of surprise, crossing his face. "I was in my compartment, mademoiselle. I retired early. The journey is long, and I value my rest." Poirot nodded as if satisfied, but Catherine could see the wheels turning in his mind. "Merci, Monsieur le Comte. We shall speak again, I think." As they walked away, Catherine whispered, "He's hiding something. Did you see how he reacted when I mentioned the time?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "I saw, mademoiselle. The Comte is a man who plays many roles, but he is not as clever as he thinks. Now, let us consider the other players in this drama. Major Knighton, for instance. He is loyal to Monsieur Van Aldine, but loyalty can mask many things. And then there is Morel, the dancer, whose passion for Monsieur Kettering is matched only by her ambition." The day wore on, the blue train drawing closer to Nice. Poirot and Catherine continued their quiet investigation, piecing together fragments of conversations, gestures, and glances. The cigarette case with the K was a tantalizing clue, but Poirot suspected it was too obvious, a breadcrumb meant to lead them astray. The scrap of paper with its cryptic message suggested a deeper plot, one that went beyond the theft of a ruby, and Ada Mason's shifting story raised questions about her true role in the tragedy. As evening fell, Poirot invited Catherine to join him in the observation car, where the glass dome offered a breathtaking view of the starlit countryside. The other passengers had retired, leaving them alone with the hum of the train and the weight of their thoughts. Mademoiselle Gray. Poirot said, his voice soft but intense, "You have seen much, but there is more to uncover. The murder of Madame Kettering is not a simple crime of greed. The ruby, the heart of fire, is a piece of the puzzle, but not the whole. There is a conspiracy here, a Cobalt conspiracy, if you will, named for the blue of this train that carries us toward the truth. And you, with your clear eyes and sharp mind, will help me find it." Catherine felt a chill, not from the night air, but from the weight of Poirot's words. "What do you mean by a Cobalt conspiracy, Monsieur Poirot?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "In the dim light, I mean, mademoiselle, that this crime was planned with care, by someone who knew Madame Kettering's weaknesses, her secrets, her heart. The ruby was a lure, a distraction to mask the true motive, and that motive lies in betrayal not of money, but of trust. We must look to the past, to the relationships that bind these passengers, to find the one who wove this web." Catherine nodded, her mind racing, and Ada Mason. "Do you think she's more than a maid?" Poirot's smile was cryptic. "I think, mademoiselle, that Ada Mason is a key. But whether she turns the lock or hides it, we shall soon discover. For now, rest. Tomorrow, in Nice, we will unravel more of this mystery." As the train sped through the night, Catherine felt a strange mix of excitement and dread. The blue train, with its elegance and its secrets, was carrying them toward a truth that was as dangerous as it was elusive, and with Hercule Poirot at her side, she knew they would find it no matter the cost. The observation car grew quiet, the stars above a silent witness to the drama unfolding below. Catherine closed her eyes, the rhythm of the train lulling her into a restless sleep, while Poirot sat wakeful, his little grey cells working tirelessly to untangle the Cobalt conspiracy that had claimed Ruth Kettering's life. Chapter 7. The Riviera's secrets. The blue train had reached its destination, and the sun-drenched French Riviera unfolded before the passengers like a canvas of opulence and intrigue, nice with its azure coastline and palm-lined promenade des Anglais shimmered under the Mediterranean sun, a playground for the wealthy and the ambitious. Yet, beneath the surface of this glamorous locale, secrets festered, waiting to be unearthed by Hercule Poirot's relentless intellect. Poirot disembarked with his characteristic precision, his small, polished shoes clicking softly against the platform. His grey eyes, sharp as ever, scanned the bustling station. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and the salty tang of the sea, but Poirot's mind was elsewhere, piecing together the fragments of a puzzle that had begun to take shape aboard the train. Ruth Kettering's murder and the theft of the heart of fire ruby were no simple crimes of passion or greed. They were threads in a tapestry of deception, and the Riviera was the perfect stage for such a drama to unfold. Catherine Grey, ever observant, stood nearby, her simple elegance a contrast to the flamboyant travellers around her. She adjusted her hat, shielding her eyes from the sun, and caught Poirot's glance. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady but tinged with curiosity. "This place feels like a masquerade. Everyone seems to be playing a part." Poirot's moustache twitched with the hint of a smile. "You are perceptive, Mademoiselle Grey. The Riviera is a theatre, and its players wear masks of charm and wealth. But masks, they slip, and Hercule Poirot is here to catch them when they do." The investigation had shifted from the confines of the blue train to the sprawling villas and bustling cafes of Nice. Rufus Van Aldine, Ruth's father, had arrived with his secretary, Major Knighton, and was installed in a grand suite at the Negresco Hotel, a bastion of luxury overlooking the sea. Van Aldine's grief was palpable, but it was laced with a burning desire for justice. He had summoned Poirot to a private meeting, his voice gruff with urgency. "Find my daughters. Kill her, Poirot," he had said, his fists clenched. "And that damned ruby. I don't care about the cursed nonsense, just get me answers." Poirot, however, was not one to be rushed. He preferred to let the truth reveal itself, like a flower opening to the sun. His first task was to interview the key players, and the Riviera provided the perfect backdrop for such encounters. The suspects had scattered across Nice, each drawn to their own pursuits, but Poirot knew that their movements would betray their secrets. His first stop was the Villa Marina, a sprawling estate where the dancer Morel had taken up residence. Morel, with her fiery temperament and penchant for drama, was a figure who commanded attention. Her connection to Derek Kettering, Ruth's estranged husband, made her a person of interest, and Poirot suspected her bitterness toward Derek held clues to the larger mystery. The villa's gardens were a riot of colour, with bougainvillea cascading over stone walls and the scent of lavender heavy in the air. Morel received Poirot in a sunlit salon, reclining on a chaise longue with the grace of a panther. Her dress, a daring shade of emerald, clung to her form, and her eyes glittered with a mix of defiance and calculation. "Monsieur Poirot," she purred, her French accent thick with theatricality, "to what do I owe this pleasure? Surely you do not think moi, a mere dancer, could be involved in such a sordid affair?" Poirot's smile was polite but unyielding. "Mademoiselle Morel, Hercule Poirot does not assume. He observes, and he listens. You were, I understand, closely acquainted with Monsieur Derek Kettering. Perhaps you can share your thoughts on his disposition?" Morel's laughter was a cascade of notes, sharp and brittle. "Derek, oh, he is a fool, that one. Charming, yes, but weak. He thought he could cast me aside, as if I were nothing." Her eyes narrowed and she leaned forward, her voice dropping to a hiss. He loved Ruth's money, not her, and now she is dead, and he thinks he is free, but he is not so clever as he believes. Poirot's finger steepled beneath his chin. And what of the ruby, mademoiselle, the heart of fire? Did Monsieur Kettering ever speak of it? Morel's expression shifted, a flicker of unease crossing her features. The ruby, a pretty bauble. Derek was obsessed with money, not jewels. But she hesitated, then continued, her voice softer. There was a man, a Greek, I think, Popopoulos, or some such name. Derek mentioned him once, said he knew. About rare gems? I thought nothing of it at the time. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Demetrius Popopoulos, a dealer in antiquities and jewels, was a name he knew well, a man whose polished exterior hid a labyrinth of connections in the underworld of high society. This was a thread worth pulling. He thanked Morel, noting the way her fingers toyed nervously with her necklace as he left. She was hiding something, but whether it was guilt or fear, he could not yet say. His next visit was to the Comte D. La Roche, Ruth's former lover, who was staying at a discreet hotel near the old town. The Comte was a man of studied elegance, his dark hair slicked back, his suit tailored to perfection. Yet there was a restlessness in his movements, a wariness in his eyes. That Poirot noted immediately. Monsieur le Comte, Poirot began, settling into a plush armchair in the hotel's private lounge. You were, I believe, once very close to Madame Kettering. Her death must be a great shock. The Comte's smile was tight, his fingers drumming lightly on the arm of his chair. A tragedy. Monsieur Poirot. Ruth was vibrant, but we had not been close for some time. I am, of course, devastated, but I know nothing of her death. Poirot tilted his head, his expression one of mild curiosity. And yet, you were on the blue train. Did you, perhaps, see anything unusual? A stranger near her compartment? A conversation that struck you as odd? The Comte's gaze flickered, but he recovered quickly. I kept to myself, monsieur. The train was crowded, and I had no reason to linger near Ruth's compartment. As for the ruby, I know nothing of it. Jewels are not my concern. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Of course, monsieur, but you are known to have an appreciation for fine things. The heart of fire is no ordinary jewel. Its history is steeped in mystery. None. The Comte's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more, and Poirot excused himself, his mind already turning over the possibilities. The Comte's reputation as a connoisseur of rare artifacts was well known, and his denial of interest in the ruby rang hollow. Was he involved in its theft, or was he merely a pawn in a larger game? As Poirot strolled along the promenade des Anglais, the sea sparkling to his left, he considered the other players in this drama. Derek Kettering, the prime suspect, was under police surveillance, his every move watched. Yet Poirot was not convinced of his guilt. The cigarette case marked with a K was too convenient, too neatly placed. Someone was trying to frame, Derek, or at least divert attention from the true culprit. Catherine Gray joined Poirot for lunch at a seaside cafe, her calm presence a balm to his racing thoughts. Over a light meal of bouillabaisse and crisp white wine, she shared her observations from the train. There was a young boy, she said, her brow furrowing. I saw him leaving the train in Nice. Just after we arrived, he seemed out of place, too well dressed for a servant, but too young to be a passenger. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A boy, you say? This is most interesting, mademoiselle. Did he carry anything? A bag, perhaps? Catherine shook her head. Not that I saw, but he moved quickly as if he didn't want to be noticed. And there was something about Ada Mason, Ruth's maid. She seemed nervous when I mentioned seeing someone near Ruth's compartment. Poirot's mind seized on this detail. Ada Mason's account of a shadowy figure had been vague, almost rehearsed. Was she protecting someone or hiding her own role? The boy Catherine described could be a courier, perhaps carrying the ruby to a buyer, or he could be a distraction planted to muddy the waters. The afternoon brought Poirot to the shop of Demetrius Popopoulos, a discreet establishment tucked away in a narrow street of the old town. The Greek dealer was a man of middle age with a polished demeanor and eyes that missed nothing. His shop was a treasure trove of antiquities, vases, statues, and, of course, jewels. Poirot noted a small display case containing a sapphire that gleamed with an almost unnatural intensity. "Monsieur Papopoulos," Poirot began, his tone cordial, but firm, "you are a man of great knowledge in the world of gems. The heart of fire ruby, surely you have heard of it." Papopoulos's smile was guarded. "Who has not? Monsieur Poirot, a magnificent stone, but cursed, they say. I deal in beauty, not superstition." And yet, Poirot pressed, such a jewel would attract many eyes, perhaps even those of the Marquis. The name hung in the air like a challenge. Papopoulos's expression did not change, but his fingers paused in their adjustment of a small statuette. "The Marquis is a myth, monsieur. A story to frighten collectors. I deal in realities." Poirot's smile was serene. "Of course, but realities can be complex. None if you hear of this ruby, or of those who seek it. You will inform Hercule Poirot." "Yes." Papopoulos inclined his head, but his eyes were unreadable. As Poirot left the shop, he felt the weight of the dealer's gaze on his back. Papopoulos was no mere bystander. He was a player in this game, and his connection to the ruby or to the Marquis was a thread Poirot intended to unravel. The evening found Poirot at a glittering soirée hosted by Lennox Tamplin, a vivacious socialite who had taken Catherine under her wing. The villa was alive with music and laughter, the air heavy with the scent of perfume and cigar smoke. Catherine, dressed in a simple but elegant gown, moved through the crowd with ease, her eyes scanning for anything out of place. Poirot admired her poise. She was proving to be an invaluable ally. As he sipped a glass of champagne, Poirot observed the interactions among the guests. Morel was there, her laughter loud and forced, her eyes darting toward Derek Kettering, who stood sullenly in a corner. The Comte de la Roche was charming a group of women, his smile practiced but strained. Major Knighton, Van Alden's secretary, hovered near his employer, his expression one of quiet vigilance. Catherine approached Poirot, her voice low. "I overheard something just now. Morel was speaking to a man I didn't recognize. She mentioned a dead something about settling accounts with Derek. It sounded ominous." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Most interesting, mademoiselle. This debt, did she say to whom it was owed?" Catherine shook her head. "No, but the man she was speaking to had a scar on his hand. It was faint, but I noticed it when he reached for his glass. A scar, a small detail, but one that set Poirot's mind racing. Scars were identifiers, markers of a past that could not be erased." He filed the information away, knowing it would resurface when the time was right. As the night wore on, Poirot's thoughts turned to the elusive Marquis. The jewel thief was a shadow, a name whispered in the circles of high society, but Poirot suspected he was more than a myth. The theft of the heart of fire bore the hallmarks of a professional, clean, precise, and calculated. Yet the murder of Ruth Kettering was messy, personal. The two crimes were linked, but not in the way the police assumed. Poirot's instinct told him that the ruby was a catalyst, not the motive. He retired to his hotel room, the sounds of the Riviera fading into the night. On his desk, he spread out a map of the train's route, marking the stops and the passengers' movements. His fingers traced the line from London to Nice, pausing at each station. Somewhere along this journey, the truth lay hidden, and Poirot was determined to find it. The next morning, he received a message from Rufus Van Alden, requesting his presence at the Negresco. The millionaire was pacing when Poirot arrived, his face edged with frustration. "The police are fools," Van Alden growled. "They're fixated on Derek, but I'm not so sure. He's a cad, but a killer. I need you to dig deeper, Poirot. Find the truth." Poirot nodded, his expression serene. "The truth, Monsieur Van Alden, is like the sea outside your window. It is vast, but it reveals itself in waves. Hercule Poirot will find the wave that carries your daughter's killer." As he left the hotel, Poirot's mind returned to Catherine's observation of the boy on the train. He made a mental note to investigate the station staff in Nice. to see if any had noticed a young courier. He also resolved to speak again with Ada Mason, whose story was beginning to fray at the edges. The Riviera was a place of beauty, but it was also a place of shadows. Poirot walked along the promenade, the sun warm on his face, and felt the pieces of the puzzle shifting into place. The heart of fire was more than a jewel. It was a symbol of greed, betrayal, and ambition. And somewhere among the villas and cafes of Nice, the truth was waiting to be uncovered. Over the next few days, Poirot pursued every lead with meticulous care. He visited the local police, who shared their findings on Derek Kettering's movements. The cigarette case was indeed his, but Poirot noted that it had been placed in Ruth's compartment, not dropped. A subtle distinction, but one that spoke of intent. He also tracked down the man with the scarred hand, identified as a minor associate of Popopoulos named Pierre Michel. Michel was evasive, claiming to know nothing of Morel or her debts, but his nervous demeanor betrayed him. Poirot let him go, knowing that pressure would eventually force the truth to surface. Catherine, meanwhile, proved her worth as an observer. At another of Lennox Tamplin's gatherings, she overheard a conversation between Major Knighton and the Comte de la Roche. Their voices low and urgent, they mentioned a delivery. She told Poirot later, her eyes wide with excitement, and something about a safe house in Antibes. Antibes, the name sent a thrill through Poirot. It was a short distance from Nice, a place where a stolen ruby could be hidden or sold. He arranged to visit the town, accompanied by Catherine, who would become his unofficial partner in the investigation. In Antibes, they explored the winding streets, stopping at a small cafe where Poirot's contacts had reported sightings of a mysterious figure, matching the Marquis's description. The cafe owner, a grizzled man with a penchant for gossip, confirmed that a stranger had been seen meeting with a young boy, possibly the same one. Catherine had noticed the trail was growing warmer, but Poirot knew that the Riviera's secrets were layered like the strata of the cliffs along the coast. Each clue revealed another, and each suspect held a piece of the truth. Morel's bitterness, the Comte's evasions, Popopoulos' connections, and Ada Mason's inconsistencies all pointed to a larger conspiracy, one that Poirot was only beginning to unravel. As he sat in his hotel room that night, the sound of the sea, a soft murmur through the open window, Poirot reviewed his notes. The heart of fire was the key, but not in the way he had first thought. Its theft was a distraction, a means to an end. The murder, however, was personal, driven by a motive that lay buried in the pasts of those aboard the blue train. He closed his notebook, his mind alight with possibilities. The Riviera had revealed much, but it had not yet given up its deepest secrets. Hercule Poirot, however, was patient. He would wait and he would watch, and when the moment came, he would strike. The investigation continued, with each day bringing new revelations. Poirot's conversations with the suspects grew more pointed, his questions more precise. He sensed that the killer was close, watching his every move, and he relished the challenge. The Riviera was a stage, and Poirot was its director, guiding the players toward the final act. Chapter 8. The Marquis enters the French Riviera stretched before Hercule Poirot. Like a canvas of opulence, its azure waters shimmering under the Mediterranean sun, its villas and grand hotels whispering of wealth and secrets. The investigation into Ruth Kettering's murder and the theft of the heart of fire ruby had brought him to this glamorous coast, where every smile hid a motive and every glance carried a shadow. The blue train, now a distant memory of steel and tragedy, had left behind a web of clues that Poirot was determined to untangle. His little grey cells buzzed with anticipation, for he sensed that the key to the mystery lay not in the trains, luxurious compartments, but in the intricate lives of its passengers, now scattered across the Riviera's sun-drenched shores. Poirot stood on the terrace of the Hotel Negresco in Nice, his impeccably polished shoes gleaming against the marble floor. His black suit, immaculate despite the warmth, marked him as a figure of precision amid the carefree elegance of the Riviera's elite. The hotel's façade, with its pink domes and white columns, was a fitting backdrop for a man who thrived on order in the chaos of human nature. He sipped a tisane, his eyes scanning the promenade where tourists and aristocrats mingled, their laughter a stark contrast to the grim task at hand. Ruth Kettering's brutal murder demanded justice, and the missing ruby or gem said to carry a curse added a layer of intrigue that Poirot found both fascinating and frustrating. The morning had begun with a visit from Rufus van Aldine, Ruth's father, whose grief had hardened into a steely resolve. The American millionaire, his face etched with lines of loss, had stormed into Poirot's suite, his voice booming with urgency. "Poirot, you've got to find this killer. My Ruth, she didn't deserve this. That ruby, that damned ruby, I should never have bought it." His secretary, Major Knighton, stood silently behind him, his calm demeanour a counterpoint to Van Alden's fury. Poirot had listened, his head tilted slightly, his moustache twitching as he absorbed the man's pain and the unspoken questions it raised. Was the ruby the true motive, or was it a convenient distraction, and why had Ruth's face been disfigured? A detail that gnawed at Poirot's sense of logic? Now, as he stood on the terrace, Poirot's thoughts turned to the elusive figure known only as the Marquis. The name had surfaced during a discreet conversation with Commissaire Coe, the French policeman overseeing the case. Coe, a weary man with a penchant for dramatic gestures, had leaned across his desk in the nice prefecture, his voice low. "Monsieur Poirot, this Marquis is a phantom, a legend among jewel thieves. No one knows his face, but his crimes are unmistakable. The theft of the Romanoff emeralds in 22, the sapphire tiara from Monte Carlo last year, always jewels, always flawless execution. If the heart of fire is in his hands, we may never recover it." Poirot had nodded, his fingers steepled. Under his chin, "A phantom, you say, Commissaire, yet even phantoms leave footprints. Tell me, what is known of his methods?" Coe had described a pattern: audacious thefts, often in plain sight, with no trace of violence until now. The murder of Ruth Kettering did not fit the Marquis' profile, and this discrepancy intrigued Poirot. A thief of such caliber would not resort to brutality unless driven by an extraordinary motive. Was the Marquis truly involved? Or was his name a convenient scapegoat for another's crime? Poirot's first task on the Riviera was to interview Morel, the flamboyant dancer and Derek Kettering's mistress, whose bitterness toward her lover had been palpable even on the train. He found her at a cafe in Antibes, her red lips pursed, around a cigarette, her eyes glinting with a mix of defiance and desperation. She wore a silk dress that clung to her curves, her movements calculated to draw attention. "Monsieur Poirot," she purred, exhaling a plume of smoke, "you think I know something about this terrible business? I am only a dancer, not a detective." Poirot smiled, his eyes sharp. "Mademoiselle, a dancer sees much every gesture, every glance. You were close to Monsieur Derek Kettering. Tell me, what did you see on the blue train?" Morel's laugh was brittle, but her words carried weight. She described Derek's agitation during the journey, his whispered arguments with Ruth in the dining car, and his sudden departure from her own compartment late at night. "He said he had to settle something," she murmured, her fingers twisting. "The cigarette, I thought he meant with Ruth. Now, I wonder." Poirot pressed further, sensing her resentment. "And the ruby, mademoiselle, did Derek ever speak of it?" Morel's eyes narrowed. "He called it a cursed thing, said it would ruin them all. But he wanted it, oh, he wanted it. Men like Derek, they always want what they cannot have." Her words hinted at a deeper grudge, perhaps against Ruth, perhaps against the ruby itself. Poirot filed this away, noting the dancer's volatility. Could her jealousy have driven her to act? Or was she merely a pawn in a larger game? Next, Poirot sought out the Comte de la Roche, Ruth's former lover, whose reputation as a charming but unscrupulous jewel enthusiast preceded him. The Comte was staying at a villa in Cap d'Anibes, its gardens lush with bougainvillea and its halls filled with the scent of wealth. He greeted Poirot with a languid smile, his tailored suit and gold cufflinks exuding confidence. "Monsieur Poirot, I am devastated by Ruth's death," he said, his voice smooth as velvet. "But surely you do not suspect me? I was in my compartment all night. Poirot's eyes twinkled with polite skepticism. Monsieur le Comte, a man of your appreciation for beauty must have admired the heart of fire. Did you see it with Madame Kettering? The Comte's smile faltered, and he admitted to visiting Ruth briefly on the train, claiming it was a nostalgic reunion. Yet Poirot sensed evasion in his polished words. The Comte's interest in jewels was well documented, and his presence on the blue train was too convenient to ignore. Was he the Marquis, or merely a man with unfortunate timing as the day wore on? Poirot's investigation took him to the bustling markets of Nice, where he met with Catherine Grey, the unassuming heiress whose sharp observations had already proven invaluable. They sat at a small cafe, the scent of fresh lavender mingling with the sea breeze. Catherine, her grey eyes thoughtful, recounted her impressions of the train's passengers. There was a young boy, she said, her voice soft but certain. I saw him leaving the train in Lyon, carrying a small bag. He seemed nervous, as if he didn't belong. Poirot's interest was piqued. A boy, you say? Describe him, mademoiselle. Catherine's description was vivid, a lad of perhaps 16, with dark hair and a furtive glance, slipping into the crowd as the train paused. Poirot wondered if this boy was a courier, perhaps hired by the Marquis to smuggle the ruby off the train. The idea fit with the thief's reputation for using intermediaries, but it did not explain Ruth's murder. The brutality of the crime suggested a personal motive, one that clashed with the Marquis's calculated precision. The day's inquiries left Poirot with more questions than answers. The Riviera, with its glittering fawade, was a maze of hidden alliances and buried grudges. He returned to the Hotel Negresco as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of cobalt and gold. In his suite, he spread out his notes, a mosaic of names and motives. Derek Kettering, the obvious suspect with a financial motive. Morel, driven by jealousy. The Comte de la Roche, with his dubious charm, and Ada Mason, the maid whose account of a shadowy figure seemed convenient, and looming over them all was the Marquis, a spectre whose involvement remained unproven. That evening, Poirot received an unexpected visitor, Demetrius Popopoulos, a Greek dealer in antiquities and jewels, known for his discretion and his connections to the underworld. Popopoulos, a rotund man with a shrewd gaze, entered Poirot's suite with a cautious smile. Monsieur Poirot, I hear you are seeking the heart of fire. A dangerous quest, no? His tone was light, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Poirot, ever courteous, offered his guest a seat. Monsieur Popopoulos, you are a man of knowledge in matters of jewels. Tell me, what do you know of the Marquis? The dealer's smile tightened, and he spoke carefully, revealing only that the Marquis was a name whispered in fear among collectors. He is no ordinary thief, Popopoulos said. He plans, he watches, he strikes like a cobra. But murder, that is not his way. Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but piercing. And yet, monsieur, a woman is dead, and the ruby is gone. If not the Marquis, then who? Popopoulos hesitated, then mentioned a rumor. A rival collector, possibly linked to the Comte de la Roche, had been inquiring about the ruby weeks before the blue train's journey. This revelation deepened Poirot's suspicions of a conspiracy, one that might extend beyond the theft to a motive rooted in betrayal or revenge. Popopoulos departed. Poirot sat in silence, his mind racing. The heart of fire was more than a jewel, it was a catalyst, drawing out the greed and desperation of those around it. But the murder, the savage blow to Ruth's face, suggested a personal vendetta, not the work of a professional thief. Poirot began to suspect that the Marquis, if involved, was not the killer but a convenient distraction, a name invoked to obscure the true mastermind. The next morning, Poirot visited the Nice police station, where Commissaire Coe shared a new clue, a scrap of paper found in Ruth's compartment. Overlooked in the initial search, it bore a single word, written in hurried script, Cobalt. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Was it a reference to the blue train itself, or something more sinister? The word echoed in his mind, hinting at a deeper scheme, a Cobalt conspiracy that tied the ruby's theft to Ruth's death. Poirot decided to focus on Ada Mason, the maid whose testimony had implicated Derek, but whose story had cracks. He arranged to meet her at a quiet villa in Villefranchi-sur-Mer, where she was staying under Van Alden's employ. Ada was nervous, her hands twisting a handkerchief as she repeated her tale of a shadowy figure near Ruth's compartment. But Poirot's questions were relentless, probing her timeline and her movements. "Mademoiselle Mason," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "you saw this figure, yet you did not raise the alarm. Why?" Ada's composure faltered and she stammered, claiming fear had silenced her. Poirot, however, noticed her eyes dart to the side, a telltale sign of deceit. He recalled Catherine's mention of the boy in lion and wondered if Ada had seen more than she, admitted perhaps even orchestrated the boy's role. Was she protecting someone? Or was she herself a player in this deadly game? The investigation took a new turn when Poirot received a telegram from London, sent by an old contact in Scotland Yard. It contained a dossier on Kitty Kidd, a notorious impersonator known for her ability to slip into any role. The description matched Ada Mason's appearance, and Poirot's pulse quickened. If Ada was Kitty Kidd, her presence on the blue train was no coincidence. She could have manipulated the scene, planted the cigarette case, even staged the shadowy figure to divert suspicion. Poirot's day ended with a walk along the Promenade d'Anglais, the sea's rhythm soothing his restless mind. The Riviera's beauty was a stark contrast to the ugliness of the crime, but it fueled his resolve. The Marquis, whether real or a myth, was a piece of the puzzle, but the true killer was closer perhaps among the passengers he had already met. The Cobalt conspiracy was taking shape, a web of deceit spun by a mastermind who had used the ruby's curse as a smokescreen dot as night fell. Poirot returned to his suite, his notebook filled with new connections. He sketched a diagram linking names and motives: Derek's greed, Morel's jealousy, the Comte's ambition, Ada's possible duplicity, and a shadowy Marquis. The word Cobalt lingered in his thoughts, a clue that felt like the key to unlocking the truth. He closed his eyes, letting his little grey cells work, knowing that the Riviera's secrets would soon yield to his relentless pursuit of order. The days that followed saw Poirot deepen his inquiries, each conversation peeling back layers of deception. He met again with Catherine, whose quiet intelligence continued to impress him. She shared a memory from the train, a fleeting glimpse of Major Knighton, Van Alden's secretary, near Ruth's compartment, his face pale and tense. This detail, combined with Ada's evasions and the Comte's slippery charm, convinced Poirot that the killer was not acting alone. The murder and theft were intertwined, but not in the way the police assumed. Poirot's investigation took him to Monte Carlo, where he attended a gala hosted by a wealthy collector rumored to have ties to the Marquis. The event was a glittering affair, with chandeliers casting light on diamond necklaces and whispered secrets. Poirot moved through the crowd, his unassuming presence allowing him to overhear snippets of conversation. A mention of Cobalt surfaced again, this time in connection to a smuggling ring operating along the Riviera. Was the ruby's theft part of a larger operation, and had Ruth's death been an unintended consequence? The gala provided another clue, a guest recognized. The Comte de la Roche as a frequent visitor to Papopolis's shop in Paris, where rare jewels changed hands under the table. Poirot's suspicions of the Comte deepened, but he lacked the evidence to confront him. Instead, he focused on Major Knighton, whose reserved demeanor had begun to seem less like royalty and more like a mask. Poirot arranged a private meeting with Knighton, probing his relationship with Van Alden and his knowledge of Ruth's affairs. Knighton's answers were measured, but a nervous tick in his jaw betrayed his unease. By the week's end, Poirot had gathered enough threads to weave a theory, though it was not yet complete. The Marquis, whether a single thief or a syndicate, was a distraction, a name used to muddy the waters. The true motive for Ruth's murder lay in personal betrayal, not greed, a betrayal that had required the ruby's theft to obscure it. Ada Mason, or Kitty Kidd, was a key player, her role possibly extending beyond maid to accomplice. The word Cobalt suggested a code, perhaps a signal among conspirators. and Poirot resolved to trace its origin as he prepared for the next phase of his investigation. Poirot felt a surge of clarity. The Riviera's glamour had not distracted him, it had sharpened his focus. The Blue Train's tragedy was a puzzle of human passions, love, hate, revenge, and he was close to solving it. The Marquis might remain a shadow, but the killer would not. Poirot's little grey cells were at work, and the truth, like the Mediterranean tide, was inevitable. Chapter 9. A tangled wet French Riviera stretched before Hercule Poirot, like a canvas of shimmering blues and vibrant greens, its beauty a stark contrast to the dark currents of deceit. Swirling around the investigation, the sun hung low, casting golden rays over the Mediterranean, but Poirot's mind was far from the picturesque scenery. The murder of Ruth Kettering and the theft of the heart of fire ruby had woven a web of lies, and he was determined to untangle it, thread by thread, with the precision of a master weaver. Poirot sat at a small cafe table in Nice, his moustache impeccably groomed, his eyes sharp as they scanned the bustling promenade. The air carried the scent of salt and jasmine, mingling with the chatter of tourists and locals. Across from him sat Catherine Grey, her calm demeanour and keen observations making her an invaluable ally. She sipped her coffee, her gaze thoughtful, as she recounted the events of the Blue Train journey. "Monsieur Poirot," Catherine began, her voice steady, "I've been thinking about that young boy I saw leaving the train in Nice. He seemed out of place, to hurried, to nervous for a simple errand. Do you think he could be connected to Ada Mason?" Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. "Mademoiselle, your observation is most astute. The boy, he is a thread in this tangled web. But let us consider Ada Mason herself. Her account of the shadowy figure near Madame Kettering's compartment, it lacks the ring of truth. Does it not? Tell me, what else did you notice about her?" Catherine frowned, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. She was nervous, but not in the way you'd expect from a maid who'd just lost her employer. It was almost as if she were playing a part, always glancing at the other passengers, as if gauging their reactions. And when I mentioned seeing Derek near Ruth's compartment, her response felt rehearsed. Poirot nodded, his fingers steepled. "Rehearsed, you say? A most interesting choice of words. Ada Mason, or perhaps someone posing as Ada Mason, is a piece of this puzzle that does not yet fit. But let us not rush to conclusions. The truth, it reveals itself in the small details, the inconsistencies that betray the liar's heart." The cafe buzzed around them, waiters weaving through tables with trays of pastries and wine. Poirot's attention drifted momentarily to a man in a tailored suit lingering near a newsstand, his face partially obscured by a hat. The man's posture suggested he was watching them, though he made no move to approach. Poirot filed the observation away, his mind returning to the case. "Mademoiselle Grey," he continued, "you have spoken of Derek Kettering, the prime suspect in the eyes of the police, yet Hercule Poirot, I am not convinced of his guilt. The cigarette case with the letter K, it is too convenient to neatly placed. A man such as Derek, desperate though he may be, does not leave such obvious clues. No, the murderer wishes us to look at Derek while they slip into the shadows." Catherine leaned forward, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Then you think someone is framing him? But who? The Comte de la Roche? He's certainly suspicious, with his interest in jewels and his connection to Ruth." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "The Comte is a man of charm and deceit, but his role in this affair is not yet clear. We must also consider Morel, the dancer whose passion and jealousy burn like a fire. And then there is the elusive Marquis, the jewel thief whose name whispers through the underworld. The threads of their motives intertwine. But which one leads to the heart of the crime?" As they spoke, the investigation had taken a new turn with the arrival of Morel, the flamboyant dancer and Derek's mistress, at the local police station. Poirot had been summoned to hear her latest statement, and he invited Catherine to join him. Valuing her perspective, the police station was a stark contrast to the Riviera's elegance, a squat, functional building with peeling paint and the faint smell of ink and sweat. Inside, Morel sat in a wooden chair, her scarlet dress a splash of colour against the drab surroundings. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her expression a mix of defiance and fear. "Monsieur Poirot," she said as he entered, her voice dripping with drama, "I have told the police everything. I saw Derek leaving Ruth's compartment that night. He was angry, muttering to himself. I swear it on my life." Poirot raised an eyebrow, settling into a chair opposite her. "Mademoiselle Morel, your passion is admirable, but let us examine the facts. You say you saw Monsieur Kettering leaving the compartment at the time of the murder, yet the guard's report places the time of death shortly before the train's arrival in Nice. Can you be precise, Op? At the hour you saw him?" Morel hesitated, her fingers twisting a silk handkerchief. "It was late, perhaps 1 in the morning. The train was quiet, and I couldn't sleep. I was walking the corridor when I saw him." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "And yet, mademoiselle, the guard passed through the corridor at 12:30 and reported no such activity. How curious that your paths did not cross. Tell me, what were you doing in the corridor at such an hour?" Morel's cheeks flushed, but she held his gaze. "I was restless. I needed air." "Is it a crime to walk the train?" "Not a crime, non," Poirot said smoothly, "but a detail that requires clarity. You see, mademoiselle, the truth is like a delicate tapestry. Pull one thread, and the entire design may unravel. Let us try again. What did you see exactly?" Morel's composure wavered, her eyes darting to the police inspector standing nearby. "I told you, I saw Derek. He was leaving her compartment, and he looked guilty. That's all I know." Poirot leaned back, his expression unreadable. "Very well. We shall return to this later. For now, you may go, but do not leave Nice, mademoiselle. The web of this case is intricate, and you are very much entangled in it." As Morel swept out of the room, her heels clicking against the floor, Catherine whispered to Poirot, "She's hiding something. Her story doesn't add up, and she's too eager to point the finger at Derek." "Oui, mademoiselle," Poirot replied softly. "Her eagerness betrays her. But we must also consider why she wishes to direct suspicion toward Monsieur Kettering. Is it jealousy, revenge, or something more sinister? The investigation continued to unfold in the sun-drenched streets of Nice, where Poirot pursued another lead, the Greek dealer Demetrius Papopoulos, a man with a reputation for handling rare jewels. Papopoulos owned a discreet shop tucked away in a narrow alley, its windows displaying only a few tasteful pieces. Inside, the air was cool, and the shelves gleamed with treasures that hinted at a world of wealth and secrecy. Papopoulos greeted Poirot with a courteous bow, his eyes sharp beneath bushy brows. "Monsieur Poirot, it is an honor. I trust you are enjoying the Riviera." "I enjoy the pursuit of truth, Monsieur Papopoulos," Poirot replied, his tone light but pointed. "And I believe you may hold a key to it. The heart of fire rube of such a jewel would not pass unnoticed in your circles. Have you heard whispers of its whereabouts?" Papopoulos's smile was guarded. "A ruby of that caliber? One hears rumors, of course, but nothing concrete. The underworld is abuzz with talk of the Marquis, but I deal only in legitimate transactions." "As you know." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Of course, monsieur. Your reputation is impeccable. Yet, if I may be so bold, there is a matter of a debt you owe me a small favor from years past. I ask only for information. Has the Marquis been active in Nice? And does the name Ada Mason mean anything to you?" Papopoulos's expression remained neutral, but his fingers paused briefly on a velvet cloth he was polishing. "The Marquis is a shadow, Monsieur Poirot. No one knows his face, only his work. As for Ada Mason, I have not heard the name, but I will make inquiries as a gesture of goodwill." Poirot inclined his head. "Your goodwill is appreciated. I trust you will contact me if you learn anything of interest." As they left the shop, Catherine glanced at Poirot. "He knows more than he's saying, doesn't he?" "Most assuredly." Poirot replied, "Papopoulos is a man who trades in secrets as much as jewels, but his debt to me ensures his cooperation, however reluctant. We shall hear from him soon." The day wore on, and Poirot's inquiries led him to the Hotel Negresco, where the Comte de la Roche was staying. The Comte was a study in elegance. his silk suit immaculate, his smile charming as he welcomed Poirot into his suite. The room overlooked the sea, its balcony open to the warm breeze. "Monsieur Poirot," the Comte said, pouring 2 glasses of cognac, "I am delighted to assist in your investigation. Poor Ruth, what a tragedy! But I assure you, I had no part in it. My affection for her was genuine, though perhaps unwise." Poirot accepted the glass but did not drink. "Your affection, Monsieur le Comte, is well documented, as is your interest in rare jewels. The heart of fire, did it tempt you, perhaps?" The Comte laughed, though his eyes were wary. "A beautiful gem, certainly, but I am no thief. My reputation may be colourful, but I am not a murderer. Besides, I was in my compartment all night, as the guard can confirm." "Indeed," Poirot said, his tone neutral, "and yet the guard's memory is not infallible. Tell me, did you see anyone near Madame Kettering's compartment that night? A young boy, perhaps, or a woman who did not belong?" The Comte's smile faltered. "A boy? No. I saw no such thing. As for women, there was only the maid, Ada Mason, bustling about as maids do. Nothing unusual." Poirot's gaze lingered on the Comte, noting the slight tremor in his hand. "Very well, monsieur. I thank you for your time, but be warned the truth has a way of surfacing, like a cork in the sea." Comte seemed overly interested in its history. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "An argument, you say? This is a thread worth pulling. I thank you, Major." As the sun set over the Riviera, Poirot sat alone in his hotel room, his little grey cells, working furiously. The case was a tapestry of motives: greed, jealousy, revenge, and betrayal. Kitty Kidd's impersonation suggested a planned deception, possibly orchestrated by the Marquis. The boy, seen fleetingly, might be a courier or a distraction. Morel's accusations against Derek were too convenient, and the Comte's interest in the ruby too intense. And then there was the mysterious broker in Marseille, a shadow behind the shadows. Poirot closed his eyes, picturing the blue train speeding through the night. The murder, the theft, the curse, they were all pieces of a larger design. But who was the weaver? The answer lay in the inconsistencies, the small details that did not align. He resolved to stage a dramatic reenactment of the journey, gathering all the suspects aboard the blue train once more. There, in the crucible of confrontation, the truth would emerge. Catherine joined him for dinner that evening, her presence a calming influence. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, "I've been thinking about St. Mary Mead. I met a young woman there, Lennox Tamplin, who mentioned knowing Ruth Kettering years ago. She hinted at a relationship Ruth kept hidden. Could it be relevant?" Poirot's eyes lit up. "Mademoiselle, you have given me a golden thread. A hidden relationship, you say? This may be the key to the motive. Tell me everything Lennox said." As Catherine recounted the conversation, Poirot's mind pieced together the fragments: a hidden relationship, a master of disguise, a stolen ruby, and a murder disguised as a robbery. The Cobalt conspiracy was taking shape, and Poirot was determined to expose its heart. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Poirot coordinated with the police to arrange the reenactment, securing the blue train for a private journey. He invited all the suspects: Derek Kettering, released on bail, Morel, the Comte de la Roche, Major Knighton, and Ada Mason, who had been detained for questioning. Popopoulos declined to attend, citing business, but Poirot suspected he would be watching from the shadows. The night of the reenactment arrived, the blue train gleaming under the station lights. Poirot stood at the platform, his eyes scanning the passengers as they boarded. Catherine was at his side, her notebook in hand, ready to record any slip-ups. The air was thick with tension, each suspect aware that Poirot was closing in. As the train began its journey, Poirot moved through the carriages, observing, questioning, and planting seeds of doubt. He spoke to Ada Mason, watching her carefully. "Mademoiselle Kidd," he said softly, using her true name, "your performance as Ada Mason was admirable, but the curtain is falling. Why did you enter Madame Kettering's compartment that night?" Ada's face paled, but she recovered quickly. "I don't know what you mean, monsieur. I was a maid, nothing more." Poirot smiled. we shall see, Mademoiselle, the truth cannot hide forever. The reenactment continued, with Poirot recreating the timeline of the murder. He noted the guards' movements, the passengers' alibis, and the fleeting glimpses of the boy. Each detail was a thread, and Poirot was weaving them together, closer to the truth with every passing moment. By the time the train reached its destination, Poirot had uncovered a crucial clue: a hidden compartment in Ada Mason's bag, containing a scrap of paper with the name the broker. The web was unraveling, and Poirot knew the final confrontation was near. Chapter 10. Poirot's gambit. Morning sun cast a golden sheen over the French Riviera, its rays glinting off the polished exterior of the blue train, which stood stationary at the nice station. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed in a crisp suit despite the Mediterranean warmth, stood on the platform, his sharp eyes scanning the scene. The train, a gleaming symbol of luxury, was about to become the stage for his most audacious move, yet a meticulously planned reenactment of the fateful journey that had ended in Ruth Kettering's murder. The air was thick with anticipation, and the gathered suspects, summoned under the pretense of a routine police inquiry, shifted uneasily as they boarded the train. Poirot's plan was bold, even by his standards. He had convinced the French authorities, with the backing of Rufus van Alden's considerable influence, to allow this unusual experiment. The blue train, temporarily recommissioned for the day, would retrace its route from Nice back toward Paris, stopping at key points to recreate the night of the murder. Every surviving passenger from that journey: Derek Kettering, Catherine Gray, Morel, the Comte de la Roche, Ada Mason, Major Knighton, and even the Greek dealer Demetrius Papopoulos had been persuaded or coerced to participate. Poirot's goal was clear: to observe, to provoke, and to unmask the truth through the pressure of reliving that deadly night. As the train's whistle pierced the air, Poirot stepped aboard, his small frame radiating authority. The interior of the carriage gleamed with polished wood and plush upholstery, a stark contrast to the dark events it had witnessed. The passengers took their assigned seats, their faces a mixture of curiosity, dread, and defiance. Catherine Gray, seated near a window, clutched her handbag, her calm exterior masking a racing mind. Derek Kettering, pale and haggard from his recent arrest, sat opposite her, his eyes darting nervously. Morel, the flamboyant dancer, lounged with exaggerated nonchalance, her scarlet lips pursed in a pout. The Comte de la Roche, ever the aristocrat, adjusted his cufflinks with studied indifference. Ada Mason, the maid, kept her head lowered, her fingers twisting a handkerchief. Major Knighton, Van Alden's secretary, stood near the carriage door, his military bearing rigid. Papopoulos, the enigmatic Greek, occupied a corner seat, his dark eyes unreadable. Poirot stood at the head of the carriage, his moustache impeccably waxed, his hands clasped behind his back. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and commanding, "we are gathered here to retrace the steps of a tragic journey. On this train, Madame Ruth Kettering met her untimely end, and the heart of fire ruby vanished. Today, we shall recreate that night, and I, Hercule Poirot, shall observe the truth as it reveals itself." A murmur rippled through the group. Derek Kettering leaned forward, his voice sharp. "This is absurd, Poirot. I've been arrested, haven't I? The police think I did it. Why drag us through this charade?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Monsieur Kettering, the truth is not always what it seems. The evidence against you, the cigarette case with the initial K. Your presence near Madame Kettering's compartment is perhaps too convenient. None? I seek the truth, not merely a culprit." Morel tossed her head, her voice dripping with scorn. "And what do you expect to find, Monsieur Poirot? A confession falling from the sky? This is a waste of my time." "Patience, Mademoiselle Morel," Poirot replied, unruffled. "The truth, like a fine wine, requires time to reveal its bouquet." The train lurched forward, beginning its journey. Poirot had arranged for the carriage to be configured exactly as it had been on the night of the murder, down to the placement of each passenger seat. The conductor, a nervous young man named Pierre, had been briefed to follow Poirot's instructions to the letter. As the train gained speed, The rhythmic clatter of wheels on tracks filled the air. A haunting echo of the night Ruth Kettering died. Poirot began his reenactment with a meticulous reconstruction of the timeline. He moved through the carriage, stopping at each passenger's seat to question them about their actions on the original journey. "Mademoiselle Gray," he said, turning to Catherine, "you were seated here, were you not? You told me you saw Monsieur Kettering near Madame Kettering's compartment at approximately midnight. Can you confirm this?" Catherine nodded, her voice steady. "Yes, Monsieur Poirot. I saw Mr. Kettering walking down the corridor. He seemed agitated, but I couldn't hear what he was saying." Derek's face flushed. "I told you. I was just checking on her. Ruth and I weren't on good terms, but I didn't kill her." Poirot raised a hand. "Calm yourself, monsieur. We shall see." He turned to Ada Mason, whose pale face seemed to shrink under his gaze. "Mademoiselle Mason, you reported seeing a shadowy figure near Madame Kettering's compartment. Can you describe this figure again?" Ada's voice trembled. "It was dark, Monsieur Poirot. I couldn't see clearly. A man, perhaps, tall and thin. I thought it might have been Mr. Kettering, but I wasn't sure." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And yet, mademoiselle, your account has shifted slightly each time you tell it. Why is that?" Ada's hands twisted her handkerchief tighter. I was frightened, monsieur. It was a terrible night." Poirot moved on, his questions probing, but never accusatory. He asked the Comte de la Roche about his interest in rare jewels, noting the aristocrat's evasive responses. He pressed Morel on her claim of seeing Derek leave Ruth's compartment, her dramatic flair faltering under his scrutiny. Major Knighton, ever loyal to Van Aldine, insisted he had been in his own compartment all night, but Poirot noted a flicker of unease in his eyes. Popopoulos, when questioned about his knowledge of the Heart of Fire, offered only cryptic smiles. As the train approached Lyon, Poirot called for a pause. He gathered the passengers in the dining car, where a light meal had been prepared. To mimic the original journey, the tension was palpable as they sat around the table, the clink of cutlery and the hum of the train the only sounds. Poirot stood at the head of the table, his presence commanding silence. "Now," he said, "let us consider the night of the murder." Madame Kettering retired to her compartment at approximately 10 o'clock. "Mademoiselle Mason, you attended?" Did you not?" Ada nodded. "Yes, sir. I helped her prepare for bed, then left her alone." "And yet," Poirot continued, "you claim to have seen a man enter her compartment later. How could you see this if you had left?" Ada's eyes widened. I returned briefly to check on her. That's when I saw the shadow." Poirot's mustache twitched. "A curious detail, mademoiselle, and one that does not align with the conductor's report, which states you were in the service area for most of the evening." A gasp escaped Catherine. The other passengers exchanged glances, their unease growing. Poirot pressed on, his voice steady. "Let us now consider the cigarette case marked with the letter K. It is perhaps too perfect a clue, non? A murderer who leaves such an obvious mark is either very foolish or very clever." Derek slammed a fist on the table. "I didn't leave it there. Someone's framing me, perhaps," Poirot said, his tone neutral. "But who and why?" The train slowed as it approached a tunnel, the darkness outside mirroring the mood within. Poirot had planned this moment carefully. As the carriage plunged into shadow, he raised his voice. "On the night of the murder, the train passed through this very tunnel. It was then, I believe, that the crime occurred. The noise of the tunnel masked any sounds, and the darkness concealed the killer's movements. The passengers sat in silence, the weight of his words sinking in. When the train emerged from the tunnel, Poirot's eyes were fixed on Ada Mason. "Mademoiselle Mason," he said softly, "I have a theory. You are not who you claim to be." Ada's face drained of color. What do you mean, monsieur?" Poirot stepped closer, his voice low but piercing. "I have made inquiries. The real Ada Mason, a maid in the employ of the Kettering family, is a woman of 40, with brown hair and a scar on her left hand. You, mademoiselle, are younger, with no such scar. I believe you are Kitty Kid." a skilled impersonator known for her work in theatrical circles. A collective gasp filled the carriage. Morel's hand flew to her mouth, and the Comte de la Roche's eyes narrowed. Derek stared at Ada, his jaw slack. Catherine's gaze was steady, as if she had suspected something all along. Kitty Kid. Poirot continued, is known for her ability to assume identities. I believe you were hired to pose as Ada Mason, perhaps to gain access to Madame Kettering's compartment and the Heart of Fire. But the question remains, who hired you? Ada or Kitty stammered, her composure crumbling. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm Ada Mason. Poirot shook his head. Non, mademoiselle. The game is up. I have telegraphed London and confirmed your true identity. You were seen in Paris W. A man known only as the Marquis and notorious jewel thief. Tell me, was it he who instructed you to steal the ruby? The carriage was silent, every eye on Kitty Kid. Her shoulders slumped and tears welled in her eyes. I didn't kill her, she whispered. I swear it. I was only supposed to take the ruby. He said it would be easy, that she'd be asleep. Who is he? Poirot demanded. Kitty shook her head, her voice barely audible. I don't know his name. He contacted me through an intermediary. I was to leave the ruby in a locker at the station in Nice. Poirot's eyes gleamed with triumph, but he pressed further. And the murder? What do you know of it? Nothing. Kitty cried. I swear, I didn't touch her. I took the ruby and left. She was alive when I left her compartment. The passengers erupted in murmurs, but Poirot raised a hand for silence. If what you say is true, mademoiselle, then we have 2 crimes, the theft of the ruby and the murder of Madame Kettering, and I believe they are not as connected as we first thought. He turned to the group, his gaze sweeping over them. The ruby was a distraction, a glittering prize to draw our attention. The murder, I suspect, was personal. Someone on this train had a motive far deeper than greed, a motive rooted in betrayal, perhaps for revenge. Catherine spoke up, her voice calm but firm. Monsieur Poirot, I saw a young boy leave the train in Nice. Just after we arrived, he was carrying a small bag. Could he be involved? Poirot's eyes lit up. An excellent observation, Mademoiselle Gray. A boy, you say. This is most interesting. Perhaps a courier sent to collect the ruby from Mademoiselle Kid's locker. The Comte de la Roche shifted uncomfortably, his fingers drumming on the table. Poirot noticed but said nothing, instead turning to Major Knighton. Major, you have been most silent. Tell me, where were you when the train passed through the tunnel? Knighton's jaw tightened. In my compartment, as I've said. I had no reason to be near Mrs. Kettering's, and yet, Poirot said, the conductor reports seeing a man matching your description in the corridor shortly before midnight. Curious, Knighton's face reddened, but he held Poirot's gaze. I may have stepped out briefly, but I didn't go near a compartment. Poirot nodded, as if satisfied, but his mind was racing. The reenactment had served its purpose, sowing doubt and exposing cracks in the suspect's stories. As the train pulled into its next stop, he gathered the passengers once more. We shall continue this journey, he said, but know this, the truth is close. I, Hercule Poirot, will not rest until it is revealed. The day wore on, the train moving through the countryside as Poirot continued his interrogations. He spoke privately with each passenger, probing their alibis, testing their reactions. With Catherine's help, he pieced together a timeline of the boy's movements, confirming her sighting with a porter at Nice station. The boy, it seemed, had been hired by an unknown figure to retrieve a package, likely the ruby dot, as evening fell. Poirot called for another gathering in the dining car. The passengers were weary, their nerves frayed from the day's ordeal. Poirot stood, his voice steady and commanding. Mesdames et messieurs, we have made progress. Mademoiselle Kidd has admitted to stealing the Heart of Fire, but she denies the murder. I believe her. The murder was committed by someone else, someone who used the theft to mask their true motive. He paused, letting the words sink in. The cigarette case, the shadowy figure, the rubies, cursed these are. All distractions. The killer is among us. And they made one fatal mistake. They underestimated the little grey cells of Hercule Poirot. The carriage was silent, the passengers frozen in their seats. Poirot's eyes moved from face to face, searching for a telltale sign of flicker of fear, a tightening of the jaw. He knew the truth was close, but he needed one final piece to complete the puzzle. The train slowed as it approached another station, the lights of the platform casting long shadows through the windows. Poirot's mind raced, connecting the dots: Kitty Kid's impersonation, the mysterious boy, the cigarette case, the tunnel's darkness. He was so close to unmasking the killer. But for now, he would let the suspects stew, their nerves fraying under the weight of his scrutiny. As the passengers disembarked for a brief stop, Poirot lingered in the carriage, his eyes fixed on the empty seat where Ruth Kettering had sat. "Soon, madam," he murmured, "your killer will face justice. This I promise." The reenactment had shaken the suspects, and Poirot knew the cracks in their stories would soon widen. The truth was within his grasp, and he would not let it slip away.